The old man never would have imagined it. When his good disciple left, he was a silver-haired, handsome young man full of dreams. But when they met again, the other had transformed into a silver-haired, beautiful young woman who had lost her dreams. What could he do? He could only tearfully accept her as his daughter. The young man's name was Lanier. In order to subjugate the Demon King, he didn't hesitate to give up a promising path in magic. Bidding farewell to his teacher, he joined the hero's party alone. To subjugate the Demon King as soon as possible, Lanier was diligent and conscientious all the way. Who would have thought his teammates were a bunch of idiots, always either causing trouble or on their way to cause trouble? Mistakenly awakening a bone dragon and nearly getting a village wiped out, or recklessly charging into the Demon King's castle and almost getting the whole party annihilated, were all standard procedure. It was all up to Lanier to save the day. What was even more infuriating was that after encountering the Demon King, the hero and his group turned and ran, leaving Lanier alone to hold back the Demon King. For this, Lanier sacrificed half of his lifespan. That's not all. A day ago, the hero's party appeared on the front lines. But looking at the monsters covering the mountains and plains before them, the hero Carl shamelessly declared, "No, if I attack, the kingdom's army will get caught in it. Let's retreat for now." The moment he finished speaking, Lanier proved him wrong. Lanier charged alone into the horde of monsters. Casting multiple spells, intense explosions instantly erupted within the monster horde. Countless minions were cleared out on the spot. The monster leader was bound in place by Lanier. Seeing the tide turn, the hero Carl decisively swung his holy sword to deliver the final blow. And it really was just the final blow. The hero, returning in complete victory, was cheered by the crowd. Lanier silently followed behind them, unnoticed by anyone. And just like that, after returning to their base, the three members of the hero's party ruthlessly kicked Lanier out of the team. They even claimed he was the one who caused trouble every time, saying that Lanier enjoyed the battlefield, while they themselves were subjugating the Demon King for the sake of peace. Their hypocrisy was disgusting. It's a complete mystery how the two girls in the party could be so blind as to fall for that guy. After leaving the party, Lanier went to a tavern to drink his sorrows away, only to run into some idiots looking for trouble. They treated Lanier like a total pushover. After venting his frustrations on them, Lanier finally came to a realization. To hell with the Demon King. I'm going to continue on the bright path of magic. But the next day, perhaps due to the curse left by the Demon King taking effect, the dragon-slaying boy finally turned into a beautiful girl. So, Lanier submitted a report to leave the battlefield and walked back alone to the starting point of her former dreams. With an anxious heart, she knocked on her teacher's door. A familiar face appeared before her. Lanier took off her hood, forced a smile, and greeted her teacher that "I'm back, teacher." But the old man, seeing a strange girl holding what should be his disciple's magic staff, instantly covered his face and began to cry bitterly. "If I had known he would die on the front lines, I should have stopped him no matter what." Hearing this, the girl froze on the spot. "Sigh, this isn't how I imagined it would go." The girl smiled and greeted her teacher. But the teacher burst into remorseful tears on the spot, only because he thought his prized student had already died in battle. Who could have guessed that the boy had merely transformed into a girl? Seeing her teacher lost in grief, the girl quickly spoke up to interrupt. She guiltily pointed a finger at herself. "Teacher, I am Lanier." The old man told the girl before him not to try and comfort him like that. But then the girl picked up her magic staff, and a familiar magical power erupted from it. The old man froze on the spot. This is Lanier's ash magic. He reached out a trembling hand, wanting to confirm it again in disbelief. Is it really Lanier? The girl had a smile on her face. "Yes, teacher, I'm back." The moment she finished speaking, a bolt of lightning shot from the old man's trembling hand, grazing the girl's face as it flew past. Behind her, a large tree was innocently struck down. After greeting his good-for-nothing disciple, the old man turned and went back into the house. "Come in," leaving the disheveled girl with a helpless, bitter smile and a look of utter despair on her face. Confirming that his precious disciple was still alive, the old man began to settle old scores. Pointing at the letters on the table, he started scolding the girl. "It's all because you issued a retirement declaration without any warning. Are you an idiot?" The girl felt extremely guilty being scolded. The letters had piled up like a mountain, yet there was no news from his disciple. The old man had thought he had died in battle, but thankfully, she finally returned in one piece. Although she might be missing certain things, that wasn't important. The old man was very relieved. Just then, another letter was magically teleported over. It was from the principal of the kingdom's top academy, Iphilia Academy. In the letter, the principal asked his dear friend Roselle if he knew where his student, the Ash Mage, was. He also mentioned that this year's class had several super geniuses and hoped the Ash Mage could come teach at the academy. The old man took out all the letters and had Lanier burn them herself. As countless letters turned to ash, the old man finally let out a sigh. Looking at the girl before him, he asked, "So, how on earth did you end up like this?" Hearing this, Lanier guiltily scratched her cheek. "Well, after leaving the hero's party, I was drinking in a bar and got hassled. After that, I ran into a succubus. I managed to defeat her after a tough fight. And then, I don't know what happened. I woke up like this." Hearing this, the old man didn't press further. He then asked her what she planned to do next about her second life. Lanier looked at the only remaining academy invitation in her hand and said with confusion that she didn't know either, which was why she came to see her teacher. The old man looked at the girl and thought for a moment. "How about going to the academy? It's a request from an old friend of mine, the National Iphilia Academy." The girl held the letter in her hand, her thoughts already drifting far away. This might be a good choice. This girl merely cast a spell in the library and shocked everyone around her. This was because the library not only had an anti-magic formation, but more importantly, the little princess next to her was born with a natural anti-magic aura. Just a moment ago, Roselle, in order to find a job for his once precious disciple, now his adorable adopted daughter, came to the principal's office at Iphilia Academy to meet his old friend. When the principal heard he wanted to recommend an excellent professor candidate, he assumed it was his disciple, the Ash Mage. He was just about to pull out the appointment papers when the other added, "It's my recently adopted daughter." The principal froze on the spot. Then what about the Ash Mage? Who knew Roselle would start playing dumb? "What are you talking about?" "Her name is Lania. Her fundamentals are very solid. She is absolutely capable of handling teaching duties." Hearing this, the principal's expression changed instantly. He never thought his old friend, who had always been so upright, would actually favor his own relative. He rejected the request on the spot. The stubborn attitude left Roselle helpless in that case. Roselle said he would be hiring a teaching assistant this year. Hearing this, the principal slammed his desk in anger. "Oh, you know how important this year is?" he said, throwing several student admission files at him. Looking at the files floating above his head, Roselle couldn't help but exclaim, "This is truly incredible. In that case, it's all the more necessary to admit my adopted daughter." The principal was so angry he roared in fury. Meanwhile, the former Lanier, now Lania, arrived at the academy library, which was filled with a strong scholarly atmosphere. "The last time I was here was 6 years ago. It's really nostalgic." At this moment, a new student was complaining about not being able to generate magic. But an upperclassman ordered him to be quiet, telling him it was normal not to be able to generate magic in this place. Hearing this, Lania was a bit puzzled. "Isn't this something you can do with just a little concentration?" Just then, a distracted Lania bumped into a person wearing a cloak. The cloaked person's documents scattered all over the floor. Lania quickly apologized and bent down to help pick them up. But the moment she looked up, Lania froze. Opposite her was none other than the fourth princess, Ella, the daughter of the stars, beloved by the stars. Lanier's little fangirl from 6 years ago was now a graceful young woman. Looking at the familiar face, Lania accidentally spaced out. She only snapped out of it when the little princess prompted her, and she hurriedly apologized. From her robe, the little princess could tell Lania was a mage. However, the little princess felt it was meaningless. Except for the Lanier of the past, the little princess considered all other mages to be useless. Lania handed the documents to the little princess. After thanking her, the princess prepared to leave, but suddenly noticed one sheet left on the floor. She picked it up and glanced at it. It looked a bit familiar. Just as the little princess was about to take it, Lania spoke up and asked, "This is a barrier circuit, isn't it? Made by that lich." Hearing this, the little princess froze. What's going on? How could she tell at a glance that this was made by the lich that wiped out the entire Night Order? This was a circuit that the heroes on the front lines couldn't deal with at all, so they had to bring it to the rear for analysis. Although confused, the little princess still said, "If you don't have any idea how to solve it, please give it back to me." However, Lania replied, "Isn't this something you can figure out how to solve with just a quick look?" The little princess wasn't happy that she could solve it. On the contrary, she was furious because in her eyes, the other was just talking nonsense. Seeing this, Lania had no choice but to demonstrate on the spot. However, as she twirled her fingers, nothing happened. The little princess looked at her with disappointment that in my presence, a mage's control over their magic will. Before she could finish, she was interrupted. Lania took a deep breath and focused. Then, a surging magical power erupted, blowing the surrounding students backward. Then, dense magic circles appeared around Lania. In just an instant, she had replicated the Lich's barrier. Then, before the princess's shocked eyes, she gave a practical demonstration of how to break it. As Lania demonstrated, the library began to emit a sacred glow. This girl never would have thought that her first assignment as a teacher would be to supervise the new student placement test. Such an important task. Was it really okay to give it to a newcomer like her? Not long ago, the old man was still worried about whether his precious disciple would be accepted. After all, the principal was an old, stubborn mule, even if he genuinely cared for the students. Lania, on the other hand, was much calmer about it. Maybe I'll be rejected. There's nothing to be done about it. But just then, there was a knock on the door. The visitor was the royal guard, Habel. He was here to deliver something to Lania on behalf of the fourth princess. An acceptance letter and a brand new magic robe. Putting on the gift from the princess, a handsome female, Mage, appeared in the mirror. However, looking at the robe that fit her so perfectly, Lania felt a little disappointed. Because this outfit was identical to the one the little princess had given her in the past. Is this style really that common? Then again, is it possible that the little princess had already guessed they were the same person? Hearing that Roselle had recommended his adopted daughter to be a teaching assistant at the academy held a special meeting. All the Magic Tower Masters attended. The Tower Masters waited nervously for the main character to appear. After all, ever since the Gray Magic Tower produced Lanier, it had been in a league of its own. No one wanted them to produce another monster. As Lania appeared, everyone in the meeting room turned to look at her. However, after sensing her power, she seemed more ordinary than they had imagined. Little did they know that the girl before them was the boy from the past. Lania followed her teacher and took a seat, feeling a faint hostility from her surroundings. Did I offend them before? The meeting began with the little princess's speech. The Purple Magic Tower Master stood up and spoke bluntly. "We have gathered here to test Assistant Professor Lania's qualifications. Professor Roselle's lectures are the foundation of all teaching. I presume that as his assistant professor, you are also quite knowledgeable." Lania listened with a forced smile. "Could I possibly say you're wrong?" Then, the White Magic Tower Master slammed the table. "One of the most outstanding students this year, Lack, might become your student. He is the heir to the Grace family, the Lords of the North. Are you capable of teaching him well?" Hearing this, Lania tilted her head and quietly asked who that was. Her teacher informed her that he was the student the Purple Magic Tower Master was very proud of. The Black Magic Tower Master partially agreed with this line of questioning. "The only point of contention is who the strongest new student is. That should be Belle." Lania again asked who that was. Her teacher helplessly facepalmed. "That's the new student cultivated by the Black Magic Tower Master." The two Tower Masters argued endlessly over whose disciple was the strongest. Seeing this, Roselle cleared his throat to interrupt them. "There's no point in us arguing here. It's better to let the students themselves be the judge." Lania deeply agreed with this. Unexpectedly, her teacher then proposed that she serve as the supervisor for the new student placement test as a way to test her teaching qualifications. Hearing this, Lania's eyes widened as she stared at her teacher. "Something so important. Why didn't you say so earlier?" At the entrance to the Hom Forest, the students participating in the placement test were gathered. Lania, looking sleepy, blended in with them. At this time, for students were particularly eye-catching. They were the most anticipated students of this year. Seeing them appear, discussions broke out all around. Why do we have to be in the same year as these monsters? But Lania just thought they were a bit noisy. Aren't any of you sleepy? She then followed the crowd forward. The scenery at this moment was picturesque. She was once the genius boy the academy was proud of. But now, wanting to return to teach, she faced skepticism from all sides, simply because the boy afflicted by a curse had become a long-haired girl. To become her teacher's assistant, Lania accepted the academy's test and serve as the supervisor for the new student placement exam. This caused dissatisfaction in teaching assistant Caesar, because becoming Professor Roselle's assistant had always been his goal. However, today that position was snatched away. So, Caesar assigned Lania the toughest area. The disciples of the Black and White Magic Tower Masters were there. At that time, no matter who lost, it could attract the dissatisfaction of the Tower Master behind them. Caesar prayed for Lania's failure in this assessment. In the northern region of Ham Forest, Lania sat on a large tree branch, resting her chin on one hand, watching the battle between the two talented boys below. The two were evenly matched, and the fight grew more and more intense, clearly exceeding the scope of a mere duel. So, Lania had to step in and stop it. With Lania's appearance, the two geniuses were shockingly bound in place, unable to move an inch. Then, Lania cast a healing spell, curing the injuries the two had sustained in the fight. After the restraints were released, Lack, the disciple of the White Magic Tower Master, voluntarily conceded defeat. Although the match was stopped, he knew that if it had continued, he would have been the one to lose. But more than winning or losing, Lack was more concerned about Lania. Are all the teaching assistants here at this level? Both students were geniuses. Neither should be eliminated here. After racking her brain, Lania finally thought of a solution. She then took the two to the Fountain of Magic in the center of the forest. Approaching this place posed a risk of death for ordinary people. At Lania's request, the two entered it and had to endure for 1 minute. Even for just a moment, both felt as if their grandmothers were calling to them from the afterlife. But the pride of a genius made it impossible for them to give up. The final result was that both of them fainted after enduring for 60 seconds. Looking at the two lying on the ground, Lania remembered that she had also tried it once. She had failed that time, so Lania decided to challenge it again. This time was different from the last. She easily walked to the center. It seemed those years of travel were not without meaning. The assessment ended, but the northern region didn't have a single person who passed. This caused dissatisfaction in assistant Caesar, because this way he would be the one in trouble. However, the master and disciple pair sitting opposite him looked completely unconcerned. After all, weren't you the one who put them in the same area? But although the two failed the assessment, their outstanding performance and tenacious will won Lania's approval. With the principal's consent, they were both admitted to the advanced class. Caesar had to grit his teeth and accept this result. The master and disciple left the meeting room. Roselle praised Lania for her good performance this time. Lania happily replied that those two guys were quite similar to her. Little did she know that their fighting style was an imitation of her former self. On her teacher's advice, Lania went to the infirmary to visit the two injured students. But she ran into the Black and White Magic Tower Masters walking towards her. Lania sighed helplessly. She had a feeling that trouble was coming. Sure enough, the next moment, upon seeing Lania, the White Magic Tower Master began to mock her. You, a supervisor who can't even make a fair judgment. The white-haired teacher wanted to teach the newcomer a lesson, but she had no idea what kind of monster was standing before her. Just now, Lania, who wanted to visit the injured students in the infirmary, ran into the Black and White Tower Masters. As soon as they met, the white-haired Tower Master went into taunt mode, wanting to make Lania bow her head in respect. But Lania was completely unmoved. Seeing Lania's indifferent expression, the white-haired Tower Master instantly felt annoyed and decided to teach her a lesson. She then stretched out her foot and stomped on Lania's instep, saying she would teach her a lesson on behalf of that pitiful old man. Hearing someone insult her teacher, Lania's expression instantly turned cold. Seeing this, the Black Tower Master at the side couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Only he knew how terrifying Lania was. Those dense magical engravings covering her entire body were no joke. To prevent the situation from escalating, the Black Tower Master quickly tried to stop the white-haired Tower Master. But it was useless. The next moment, the white-haired Tower Master was covered in crackling electricity. As the white-haired Tower Master pointed a finger, the lightning flew towards Lania. Facing the incoming attack, Lania remained unmoved. Seeing this, the white-haired Tower Master gloated on the side. But the next moment, an explosion sounded above her own head. The white-haired Tower Master froze on the spot, turning to look back in disbelief. She saw the roof behind her shattered, with rubble falling down. She thought the Black Tower Master had intervened and angrily turned to question him. Why did you seize control of my magic? Little did she know, the Black Tower Master, who had seen everything, was even more incredulous. She had so easily doubled and returned the White Tower Master's spell. This is simply a monster. Seeing the White Tower Master still rambling on, unaware of the great terror right behind her, the Black Tower Master quickly coughed to cut her off, then pulled her away to visit his disciple. As he walked, he guiltily glanced back. He saw Lania staring at the two of them with emotionless, sapphire-like eyes. Seeing the two Tower Masters leave, Lania couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. I thought I was going to get hit, but I didn't expect to get my shoe stepped on. Looking up at the broken ceiling, she couldn't help but sigh again that I might have overdone a bit. The girl never expected that on her very first day of teaching, a student would actually challenge her. And that person was her former little fangirl. Just now, Lania, who was quietly reading a book by herself, was arranged by her teacher to substitute for his class. And the advice her teacher gave her was to never overestimate them. You absolutely cannot say things like, I just did it casually. Lania didn't understand this at all. She argued, but I really did just do it casually. Hearing this, the teacher angrily cut her off. Yes, that's exactly the kind of thing you absolutely cannot say. Don't assume everyone is like you. This student was good at everything, except understanding that not everyone had her kind of talent. The scene changes, and Lania is standing at the lecturer's podium. She then introduces herself, saying she will be substituting for Professor Roselle's class. As expected, this drew skepticism from the students. They began whispering amongst themselves. The one with the most obvious attitude was one of this year's geniuses, the next Gray Magic Tower Master, Lester. Also a candidate for the Gray Magic Tower Master position, Lester had always been compared to Lanier. And no matter how hard Lester worked, in the eyes of those around her, she could never surpass him. In the placement assessment 2 days ago, Lester took the top spot by controlling over a dozen familiars by herself. By sharing the vision of birds flying in the sky, Lester saw Lania completely soaked. But how was that possible? The only place with water in this forest was the fountain of magic in the center. But even Lord Lanier couldn't reach the center, let alone anyone else. Lester strongly disapproved of Lania, who had taken Lanier's place, believing like everyone else that she had gotten in through connections. So, after Lania announced the start of class and said to ask questions at any time, she decisively raised her hand, indicating she had a question. Hearing this, Lania was taken aback. Class has only just begun, but since a student had asked, she had to answer. Lester didn't hold back, directly asking a question that only Professor Roselle could solve. It was about the theory of the scales. Looking at Lester in the students' seats, Lania felt that she seemed very unhappy. She kept staring at her as if she were defending someone. Lania stared at the question and was silent for a good while. This action made the audience think she was all talk and no substance, and they began to laugh at her. And looking at the silent Lania, Lester also began to mock her. You can't solve it, can you? It seems I expected too much of Professor Roselle's judgment. Her attitude surprised even the students below. Lester said with a grim face that it was too soon for Lania to be an assistant professor. Little did she know, Lania was just thinking the scales. Isn't that something you can just easily materialize? The girl merely materialized a set of scales and shocked everyone in the academy. This was because it had touched upon the very root of magic. Lania's performance in the open lecture caused a huge uproar in the academy. The professors all thought she was just being deliberately mysterious, so they flocked to the principal's office to complain. The principal was getting a headache from all the noise around him. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he slammed his hand on the table to quiet everyone down. Since you doubt Assistant Professor Lania's abilities, why not go see for yourselves? The principal decided to have Lania give another open lecture. As the heir to the Gray Magic Tower Master, Lester was especially skeptical of Lania's abilities. Even though she had witnessed it with her own eyes, she couldn't believe someone could really materialize the scales just by putting their hands together. Lack and Bell, also geniuses, advised her not to show her hostility so obviously. After all, only they, who had encountered her in the placement test, knew how terrifying that person was. However, Lester didn't believe what they said. In her heart, only the Lanier of the past was the absolute standard. At this moment, she guessed that the other person must be stressing over the open lecture. After all, not only would professors from every department be auditing this lecture, but even those high and mighty Magic Tower Masters would be there. But Lania, who should have been stressing, was leisurely drinking coffee with Princess Ella. Princess Ella clearly liked this new assistant professor very much. The two of them got along very happily. She was looking forward to the other's upcoming performance. On the day of the open lecture, Academy professors flocked to audit. The old rivals, the Black and White Magic Tower Masters, met. They immediately exchanged a round of friendly greetings. Lack and Bell both looked helplessly at their own teachers. The open lecture began. Lania first introduced herself, then asked everyone to listen carefully. However, facing Lania, a mere assistant professor, the group of professors above were waiting to see her make a fool of herself. Sure enough, as soon as Lania began, the group above started whispering and finding fault. Even the white-haired Magic Tower Master felt that this was all she was capable of. After all, the people gathered here today all had decades of teaching experience. However, this thought was quickly proven wrong. Lania put her hands together. Then, a mysterious set of scales appeared before everyone. The professors were stunned on the spot. Someone even stood up in excitement. Is this what the students saw? The purple Magic Tower Master also stared with wide, disbelieving eyes. Those are the scales of exchange between mages and the stars, representing the truth of the world. Facing everyone's shock, Lania calmly continued her lecture. Next, she demonstrated the 3 stages of magic formation. The first stage, circuit creation. Lania drew a perfect circuit in the air, directly shocking all the professors present. The second stage, payment of magic. Her control of magic was flawless. A perfect equivalent exchange. The third stage, designation of direction. As Lania pointed a finger, a powerful fire spell erupted. And that is the basic process of magic formation. After the series of actions, the scene fell into silence. At this moment, Lack looked at his teacher, but she had long been too shocked to react. Princess Ella smiled as she watched the person on the stage. She was indeed as brilliant as she had expected. Next, Lania explained the fundamentals of the path of magic, which deeply moved the white-haired Tower Master. In the past, she had been full of passion for learning, but now, she had long forgotten her original intention. The white-haired Tower Master angrily slammed the table and stood up. However, despite disliking her, she had to admit her excellence. Then, the white-haired Tower Master applauded Lania's brilliant lecture. Lack looked at his master in surprise, then stood up and joined in. Next, the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. At this moment, Lania proved herself to everyone. With a happy expression, she announced, "The open lecture is now over." Starting the next day, Lania became the center of attention for all the students. Her outstanding performance won everyone's approval. Everywhere she went, she was surrounded by fans. Being watched by so many eyes, Lania looked very uncomfortable. But Professor Roselle, next to her, was beaming with pride. Just now, the two of them were suddenly called to the principal's office. Lania thought the principal was angry. Unexpectedly, the principal excitedly patted her on the shoulder, saying something like, "The future of this academy and its mages is in your hands." Lania glanced at her teacher and whispered, "Teacher, you seem to be in a very good mood." Hearing this, Professor Roselle laughed and said, "Is it that obvious?" He thought of the usually arrogant Black and White Magic Tower Masters running to the principal's office to try and poach her. It's truly delightful. Another day of vindication. Next, Lania began her teaching career. But looking at the complex magic formula on the blackboard, Lack just felt dizzy. He couldn't understand it at all. But the silver lining was that he wasn't the only one who couldn't understand it. He felt that his path in the Magic Academy would be long and difficult. After a busy day of work, Lania looked at her messy office with a headache, unconsciously making an excuse for her own laziness. After all, being this busy, it's understandable, right? She sprawled out on the sofa, feeling like it had been a long time since she had been this relaxed. After all, she had retired from the front lines and no longer had to see those guys. Relatively speaking, teaching didn't seem that hard. After all, not a single student had come to ask a question. This must mean I'm teaching pretty well, right? However, just as she finished her moment of narcissism, there was a knock on the door. "Assistant Professor Lania, may I come in?" A mouthful of old blood spurted from Lania's mouth. Damn it, of all times. Lania wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth. She was about to invite the person in, but when she opened the door, she saw it was that student who was so hostile toward her. Frightened, Lania quickly shut the door behind her, afraid the other would look for trouble again. At this moment, Lania was covered in a cold sweat. By the way, what was her name again? Laster? Lester? Lister? But Lester showed no hostility this time. She really had something important to do. She wanted to apologize for her previous rude behavior, and also to thank Lania for helping her find her lost original intention. However, before she could speak, before her gratitude could be conveyed, she was interrupted. 3 old geezers appeared before Lania. "We've been looking for you for a long time." They were the elders of the gray magic tower. The bald old man among them rudely pushed Lester aside. The other 2 also completely ignored her, only fawning over Lania. Lania felt extremely annoyed. 5 or 6 years have passed, and these old guys haven't changed at all. Just then, Rania noticed Lester's strange expression. What's wrong with her? Suddenly, Lester was bumped by the bald old man. Immediately after, her books fell to the ground. A nervous Lester cried out in alarm. She frantically squatted down to pick up the fallen books. At this moment, the 3 old men turned to look displeased, looking down on her as if she were an ant. The bald old man scoffed, making such a small mistake. What a good-for-nothing. Squatting on the ground, Lester was so scared she trembled all over. The fear of being dominated for years swept over her entire body. At this moment, Rania looked at the 3 men before her with a cold expression. The 3 turned, wanting to continue cozying up to her, but were mercilessly cut off by Rania. She pulled Lester up. "That I'm already booked for today. You should leave." Despite the fake smile on her face, her words were blunt. Be careful on your way back, everyone." The 3 old men didn't dare to say anything more, turning and leaving while muttering curses. Lester turned, moved to look at Rania behind her, just as she was about to say something. But Rania pointed in another direction. "That if you leave this way, you won't run into them. Didn't I just say I was booked? If there's something you need, we could talk next time." As soon as she finished speaking, she slammed the door shut, leaving only a bewildered Lester standing outside. S.O. The person who booked her. Wasn't me. Back in her room, Rania could no longer hold on. She opened her mouth and spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood. She slowly forced a smile as blood trickled down the corner of her mouth. It's been so long. I almost forgot. To think it would happen at a time like this. He was originally the heir to the magic tower with a bright future, but he was afflicted with a curse that caused his body to undergo a physical mutation. As the curse flared up, Rania endured the sharp pain in her heart and ran out of the academy. Although she barely held on with her powerful magic, this was not a long-term solution. In the past, he had sacrificed half of his life to hold back the Demon King. It was at that time that his heart was cursed by the Demon King. But the few people he saved showed no gratitude at all. They only saw him as a useful tool. The so-called Saintess had a disgusting attitude. Without my help, he'd be hovering at death's door right now. At this moment, Rania indeed had 1 foot in the grave. Enduring the pain, she arrived at the door of a small shop on an old street. The person inside sensed something. A pair of sharp, spirit-like eyes looked toward the door. As the wooden door was pushed open, Rania's figure appeared in his eyes. "So it's you. What are you doing here so late? By the way, when did you develop this strange hobby, Lanier?" In just an instant, the old man saw through Rania's true identity. His power was undeniable. Recognized, Rania sighed, helplessly. "Oh, you think I wanted to be like this?" The old man calmly extended a finger. "A change in appearance, a change in soul, and the curse on your heart. What on earth have you been through these past few years?" In the past, Lanier, as the heir to the kingdom's gray magic tower, had a glorious future. However, he gave it all up, joined the hero's party, and began the journey to subjugate the Demon King. Unexpectedly, in the end, this group of people kicked him out. An upset Lanier went to a tavern to get drunk. As a result, he turned his head and saw a beautiful figure. Lanier widened his eyes in disbelief, wondering if he had had too much to drink. It was because of this woman's identity. She was the succubus Queen Lepe. Lanier followed the succubus to her residence. He then proceeded to teach her a little lesson. He was just looking for a place to vent his frustration, and she had just delivered herself to his doorstep. But just at this moment, the door was suddenly smashed open. A black knight in full armor appeared. It turned out he had rushed over after receiving the succubus's distress signal. He had the power of a demon king's army commander. However, despite being so powerful, he couldn't even withstand a single move. This scene completely shocked the succubus. Are mages supposed to be this good at close combat? Given the situation, if she didn't think of something, she might really die. Just then, she suddenly thought of a gem. It was related to a task given to her by the Demon King. Lepe had accepted the order to store all the essence she had collected over the past decades in the gem given by the Demon King. She thought this thing should be able to stop him, or at the very least, allow her to escape. However, when she took out the gem, she found she couldn't control it at all. As the gem's magic was released, the succubus completely lost control, a black mist swirling around her. At the same time, Lanier began to cough up large amounts of blood. This was because the black mist was filled with the Demon King's aura, which triggered the curse on Lanier. Looking at this woman before him, who had completely lost her sanity and was exuding an ominous aura, Lanier also got serious that I won't lose again this time. As the two clashed, a violent explosion erupted from the house, sending the people outside flying. When the smoke and dust cleared, a long-haired girl appeared within. The girl slowly opened her sapphire-like eyes. The auras of the other two could no longer be felt in the vicinity. She slowly raised an arm. The magic sigil she had stored had all disappeared. The girl sat cross-legged. She felt the outcome wasn't too bad. At least she had survived. Suddenly, she realized something. Speaking of which, these larger breasts, this longer hair, and these wrists that have become wider and thinner. Could it be I've turned into a woman? Realizing what had happened, she felt rage surge to her head. What on earth did that crazy woman Lepe do to me? The Demon King's army might still be nearby, but something unexpected has happened to my body. I have to find a way. In the end, she summoned a scale at the cost of the remaining 90% of her magic power. She exchanged it for the magic sigils that had disappeared due to the curse. As her magic returned, Rania reached out and broke the barrier the succubus had set up here. The next second, an intense demonic aura was released. The people around stared in terror at the source of the demonic aura. The city guards rushed to maintain order. Rania quietly slipped away. She took out a red orb to examine it. It was something left at the scene. She didn't know what this orb, which exuded the Demon King's aura, was. What was even stranger to her was the physical mutation from an unknown cause. Compared to this, it would have been simpler to just die. Rania helplessly spread her hands, explaining how she had turned into a woman. The old man listened to her story while concocting a magic potion. It seems you've had a good 5 years. Hearing this, Rania couldn't remain calm. How can you tell I've had it good? At this moment, the old man extended his right hand and then snapped his fingers. In the next moment, the old man transformed into a graceful and beautiful female elf. Then, she poured the prepared potion into a bottle. She stated that while she couldn't stop her physical mutation, she could help stop the curse's erosion. Rania was not surprised by the other's transformation, merely shaking the potion in her hand. Can this really stop the curse? Of course not. But with this, you can survive the curse's outbreak without needing the Saintess. Rania looked at her, asking if she knew something. The female elf didn't deny it, but said she couldn't talk about it. Hearing this, Rania was instantly speechless. How annoying. Although she said that, Rania was still grateful for her help and asked if there was anything she could do to help. The other person thought for a moment and felt there wasn't anything special she needed. Finally, she remembered something. Lately, I felt something in the sewers. She asked Rania to help take care of it, although I've already sent a disciple. The girl stared murderously at the man behind her, simply because even though they were both assistant professors, he was more popular with the students. Just a moment ago, Bell was alone in the sewers helping his teacher deal with magical beasts. Suddenly, he sensed someone's presence approaching. In these sewers filled with the undead, someone so conspicuous was probably the mastermind. So, Bell unhesitatingly launched a magic spell toward the target. Unexpectedly, the other person easily dodged it. Seeing this, Bell no longer held back. He unleashed his full-power dark magic at the target. But the opponent was too fast, and in the blink of an eye, they were right in front of him. Just as Bell was beginning to despair, the opponent unexpectedly flicked him on the forehead. Flicked! Bell looked completely confused. Just then, a familiar voice was heard that you've improved a lot. But you're too reckless, attacking without even identifying your target. As the person took off their hood, a familiar figure appeared. It was Assistant Professor Rania. Bell wondered why she was here, never imagining it was his own teacher's arrangement. With Rania's help, the speed of dealing with the magical beasts increased significantly. Watching her sharp combat skills, Bell was curious about what she did before. Her performance didn't seem like a scholar's at all, but more like a battle-hardened soldier's. Faced with Bell's question, Rania fell silent. The IT was just some dirty errand work, that's all. The small talk ended. It was about time to wrap things up. At this point, a stone door guarded by numerous magical beasts appeared before the two of them. Clearly, this was the final destination. Rania no longer held back. She unleashed a complex spell, and in an instant, the magical beasts blocking the way were turned to ash in a flash of lightning. After clearing the obstacle before them, Rania went forward and pushed open the stone door. A stone coffin filled with an ominous aura stood silently on an altar. The scene changes. Rania came to the potion shop again. She took something out from her clothes. It was the stone coffin from the sewers. This small stone coffin was filled with demonic energy and guarded by a large number of undead. This matter was very suspicious. You have to understand, this is the kingdom's capital. A barrier that distorts perception had been cast on it, which is why it hadn't been discovered all this time. All these signs indicated that something big might happen soon. Rania had a premonition that all of this was inextricably linked to that person. After more than a month, Rania gradually got used to teaching. However, even though she felt her explanations were simple enough, the students below clearly didn't understand at all. It seemed only Lester was able to understand. Seeing this, Rania was speechless. Isn't this something you should understand at a glance? She never considered that perhaps everyone's talent is different and that she had always been at the top. Rania's teaching led to numerous complaints. Students felt the knowledge she taught was too complex. She listened with a cold sweat to the accusations from Assistant Professor Ziesel. Seizing the opportunity, Ziesel was not polite at all, telling Rania to think more from the student's perspective. Of course, Rania knew her own shortcomings and asked the other to calm down. But Ziesel had a mocking expression. Compared to Kelt, who is also an assistant professor, you're far behind. Assistant Professor Kelt was once active on the battlefield. He retired due to injury and began to study the path of magic. He always puts himself in the students' shoes and is deeply loved by them. Ziesel said with a disdainful look, completely different from some people. Hearing this, Rania fell silent, her hands clenching involuntarily. Lack heard that his classmates liked to discuss their studies while drinking coffee at the cafe, so he invited the top student, Lester, here to humbly ask for guidance. Although Lester didn't understand why he couldn't solve such a simple problem, she still explained in detail which books to refer to for each problem and told him that for the basics of magic, he could ask Assistant Professor Kelt for help. Rania, who was also in the cafe, instantly felt annoyed upon hearing the familiar name. She actually knew there was a problem with her teaching. She could tell from the students' confused expressions, but she just couldn't accept that she was inferior to him. Just thinking about it made her angry. Just then, Rania heard a student's voice behind her. It turned out Assistant Professor Kelt was also here. Looking at this gentle-looking man, Rania stared at him seriously. I'd like to see what's so special about you. Listening to his detailed explanation for the student, Rania felt it was no different from her own explanations. She was completely unaware that she always skipped the process and gave the result directly. And yet, she had to admit that the students' expressions were completely different. Compared to the students in her own class, these few students in front of her had clearly gained a full understanding. Rania watched his back, full of unwillingness to concede defeat, not understanding where exactly she fell short. Seeing the students take their leave, Rania walked over to Assistant Professor Kelt's table. Kelt was curious why she was looking for him. After all, this was the first time they had met, and they had no prior interaction. Seeing that she seemed to be troubled by something, Kelt said she could talk to him about it. Hearing this, Rania voiced her confusion that I've been trying so hard, but the students still look like they don't understand. She wanted to know if there was some trick to it. Kelt felt honored to be asked and said that the students were just children, after all. I just point them in the right direction when they're lost. Then, Kelt offered to recommend some books on education. So, the two of them walked toward Kelt's research lab. However, just then, an angry shout interrupted them. The person who arrived was Kelt's superior, Professor Marquardt. Marquardt immediately started berating Kelt, completely ignoring the presence of an outsider. It was because just now, during Markhart's practical combat training, a magical beast had lost control and injured a student. Markhart blamed everything on assistant Professor Kelt. After he left, Rania asked Kelt if he was okay. Kelt forced a smile and said he was used to it. But was that really the case? In the evening, at the training grounds in the forest outside the academy, Lack and Bell both happened to come here to train. They sensed dense auras all around. The two agreed to have a match. It was called a match, but it was actually a real battle. After all, neither of them expected magical beasts to appear at the academy. This was no ordinary incident. The academy was, after all, protected by a barrier. The assistant professor deliberately offered to take the blame for the professor at the tribunal, and thus successfully sent the professor to jail. That day, Assistant Professor Kelt had just been insulted by Professor Markhart. That night, the out-of-control magical beasts broke into the academy. Seeing the magical beasts breaking into the school building, the ordinary students were terrified and panicked. Some students were even almost eaten alive. Fortunately, Lester appeared in time to save the day. She was surrounded by a large number of summoned beasts. Seeing that her pet beasts were enough to handle the situation, she left the scene to her little cuties. She herself ran towards the source of the ominous aura. Meanwhile, in the forest outside the academy, Black and Bell finished off the magical beasts in front of them, but they didn't dare to relax at all because the real battle was just beginning. A mountain-like figure appeared in the distance. The two used all their strength and finally managed to inflict some damage on the monster. Who would have thought this monster would fight unfairly? It could actually regenerate at high speed. It seems we have to think of another way. Just then, a voice came from behind them. You do indeed need to think of another way. It was their classmate Lester, who had followed the aura. Unlike the two brutes who only knew how to fight, Lester was undoubtedly the brains of the operation. With a single glance, she found the monster's weakness that IT has a very small core inside its body. If we don't destroy it, the monster will keep regenerating. Finding the monster's weakness, the two were instantly energized, feeling that things had suddenly become simple. Next, Lester cast a buff spell on the two of them, telling them to make their move. Without any hesitation, the two charged toward the target. They worked together to break open the monster's body, exposing its core. Finally, Lester would deliver the final blow. Lester summoned a lightning spirit and ordered it to aim for the core. As the lightning spirit charged up, arcs of electricity swirled around. Immediately after, a huge magic circle appeared in midair. Bolts of lightning fell from it, mercilessly striking the monster's core. As expected, the monster was successfully defeated. The next day, students began to clean up the damaged school buildings. They believed the incident was all Professor Markhart's fault because he raised magical beasts and had students do practical combat training. But Lack had his doubts that weren't the magical beasts managed by Assistant Professor Kelt. Such a serious incident led to Professor Markhart facing an academy tribunal. It was presided over by the headmaster himself. As the gavel fell, the trial began. Although all the evidence pointed to Professor Markhart, Professor Markhart completely denied it. These magical beasts were all raised for practical combat training. How dare you suspect me of controlling magical beasts to attack humans? This is an insult to a knight. Although Markhart had a bad temper, he had a strong sense of knightly honor. But there was just too much evidence. The Academy's defensive barrier wasn't something just anyone could break. It was almost certain that this was an inside job, and Professor Markhart wasn't very popular on a normal day. No one was willing to believe him. Just then, someone tried to force their way in, ignoring the guards. Seeing it was Markhart's assistant professor, the headmaster allowed him to come forward. Upon seeing Assistant Professor Kelt, Markhart flew into a rage. It's all because of your negligence that the magical beasts lost control. Kelt defended his teacher. Although this incident caused great losses, it also proves the necessity of practical training. Of course, this was undoubtedly an accident. Kelt said he was willing to take the blame for it. However, he was just an assistant professor in the end. The headmaster stated he couldn't bear that responsibility. So, Professor Markhart was sentenced to imprisonment. As the gavel fell again, the trial ended. The final verdict made Professor Markhart feel his character had been insulted. He cursed and wanted to argue further, but was stopped by the staff. Meanwhile, Princess Era, the daughter of the stars, received a revelation from stars. She followed the stars' guidance to a door, which was Rania's office. Era knocked and entered. The messy scene before her surprised Era somewhat. At that moment, Rania was preparing for a lesson. Perfect timing, she said, and asked Era to see if she could understand. Rania said she was going to give a simple explanation. But looking at the complex content on the blackboard, Princess Era felt that Assistant Professor Rania might have a misunderstanding of the word simple. She gave a dry cough and said she had always constructed magic circuits by feeling, so she couldn't help with this. Hearing this, Rania helplessly crossed her arms, her head aching. Era felt that Rania had changed a lot recently, that you're always looking up this kind of material. Hearing this, Rania looked down and said that Assistant Professor Kelt had lent them to her. The moment she heard the name Kelt, Princess Era's expression became strange. At that moment, she received a divine revelation. A moment ago, the girl was humbly asking the man for guidance. The next moment, she was mercilessly pinning him to the ground. It was because this man before her was a traitor. The magical beast rampage incident led to Professor Markhart's imprisonment, so his classes were temporarily taken over by Assistant Professor Kelt. This was met with enthusiastic cheers from the students. However, Lack and the others had a bad feeling. Even Princess Era, the daughter of the stars, felt the same. To find out the truth, the group secretly went to Assistant Professor Kelt's research lab. However, the magical beasts inside were still properly caged. The suppression magic was working normally, and nothing suspicious was found in the room. But the guidance of the stars told Princess Era that there was indeed a problem here. As Princess Era was thinking about what the problem could be, she didn't notice the door behind her being pushed open again. Not until a voice came from behind her did Princess Era hurriedly turn to look. She saw Assistant Professors Kelt and Rania standing at the door. Rania was curious about what they were all gathered here for, and she soon got her answer. Lack walked directly up to Assistant Professor Kelt and bluntly stated his suspicion. "You were the one who let the magical beasts out, weren't you, Assistant Professor?" Assistant Professor Kelt wanted to object, but Bell told Lack to state his evidence directly. But Lack confidently said, "It's my intuition. The assistant professor smells the same as the magical beasts." On the other side, Lester was curious why Professor Rania was here. Rania explained that she was here to return a book. After speaking, Rania stepped forward to interrupt Lack, saying it was too late today and that she hoped they could discuss this tomorrow. Rania clearly didn't want to pursue the matter. However, she was refuted by Princess Era because the guidance of the stars told her that what Lack said was correct. Hearing this, Rania looked helpless. Behind her, Assistant Professor Kelt's face darkened. They thought he would attack directly, but unexpectedly, he admitted it. Next, with his award-winning acting skills, Kelt fabricated a moving and tragic story, successfully fooling the few naive students. He not only made them feel that he had no choice but to do what he did, but also moved them to the point where they wanted to help with the aftermath. Only the little princess remained serious, because the stars were sending a strong warning. Suddenly, the little princess was shocked. The connection to the stars had been severed. Just then, a loud rumbling sound was heard. Assistant Professor Kelt was sent flying. The others turned to look in disbelief. They saw Assistant Professor Rania at the side, irritably pulling at her hair. "Seriously? I just watched from the sidelines for a bit, and you spin a story like this. Looks like I'll have to beat you up, Assistant Professor Kelt. Or should I call you a retard?" The group wondered what had just happened and why Assistant Professor Rania did that. Rania didn't explain, just let out a long sigh. But Assistant Professor Kelt, who had been sent flying, didn't ask why. Instead, he let out a villainous laugh. The group turned to look at the clearly abnormal Assistant Professor Kelt. At this point, Kelt was no longer pretending, wearing a complete villain's expression. "Assistant Professor Rania, you're more capable than I imagined." After speaking, he directly released the seal on the magical beasts, and the cages opened. The freed magical beasts all rushed out. Then, Kelt wore a sinister smile that if you chase after them now, it might not be too late. Although the plan has changed, it's not a big problem. This should be enough to destroy the academy. However, how could Rania just watch this happen? She arranged for the 4 talented students before her to deal with the magical beasts. She herself would stay behind to deal with this retard. Kelt had long heard that Rania was strong, but he felt he was stronger. He raised his hand and threw a fireball at Rania. Unexpectedly, Rania casually swatted it away. Rania said disdainfully, "Is that all?" Seeing this, Kelt didn't get angry and launched a continuous barrage of magic attacks. but Rania easily blocked them, someone who would even betray his own master. What a retard. Hearing the word master, Kelt looked disdainful. You're not talking about that guy Markhart, are you? For me, there's only one teacher, and Rania had already guessed who that person was. That guy reeking of filthy, demonic energy. She took out a small stone coffin from her clothes. It was the very thing guarded by the undead in the sewers. Seeing this, Kelt was momentarily stunned. How do you have that? However, not only did Rania not answer, she crushed it into pieces. This action completely enraged Kelt. Treat a sacred object like that. Do you know how precious that is? How dare you? The enraged Kelt unleashed his ultimate move. Countless dark needles shot towards Rania. Finally, Rania fell amidst the smoke and dust. Kelt, thinking he had won, couldn't help but look at his own hands. So, this is the feeling of power. Now I can crush that guy Markhart with one hand. But before he could finish admiring himself, he was interrupted by a voice. What a pitiful guy. Rania, who had just taken a potion, rose from the smoke and dust, completely unharmed. Although he didn't expect Rania to withstand the attack, Kelt wasn't flustered at all. After all, relying on potions isn't any real skill. Little did he know that it was just the thing Rania drank every month to suppress her curse. While listening to him ramble on earlier, she suddenly remembered she hadn't drunk it this month, so she drank a bottle. But Kelt didn't care at all, because he still had a trump card. As he finished casting, a dark impact flew towards Rania. Seeing this, Rania smiled confidently. She stood her ground without moving an inch, but the dark impact dissipated before it could even get near her. Kel on the other side was dumbfounded. What's going on? At this moment, Rania was smiling. I already know who's behind you. It's time for this farce to end. Empowered by magic, Rania rushed to Kelt's side and struck him heavily on the chest with her palm. Kelt immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and briefly lost consciousness. Rania flexed her wrist, looking at the person on the ground. She told him to get up quickly because she had held back. Then, dense magic sigils appeared behind her. At this moment, it looked just like the gate of Babylon. Kelt, lying on the ground, secretly gathered his strength. Then, the dark needles attacked again, but they were all blocked one by one. From beginning to end, Rania didn't show the slightest change in expression. Kelt got up, trembling, still thinking she had just been lucky enough to cancel it out. After applying several buffs to himself, he unleashed an enhanced dark impact again. A violent explosion was heard, and the surroundings were left a complete mess. Seeing this, Kelt turned to leave with disdain. I didn't expect her to talk so big, but be so average in strength. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a voice came from behind. Are you talking about yourself? Rania, who had reappeared, placed a hand on Kelt's head and then mercilessly slammed it into the ground, grinding it repeatedly. Rania looked at the person in her hand as if he were trash. Looks like it's necessary to make a traitor like you suffer a bit. You beast who betrayed humanity. Weren't you so arrogant? Why are you silent now? Rania grabbed Kelt's head and smashed it into the ground again and again. After she'd had her fill, she finally let him go. Humanity isn't weak. You're just too much of a piece of trash. After some time, the Academy guards finally rushed over. Rania, who had grown tired of waiting, couldn't help but complain, "You're so late," even though such a huge commotion was caused. Hearing this, the guards hurriedly said it's because there were too many magical beasts. They asked what the situation was. Rania lifted Kelt's head and showed his black blood to everyone. This is the symbol of a soul sold to a demon. If these people don't use demonic energy, it's hard to tell them apart by appearance alone. Rania explained that she saw him use demonic energy, so she knocked him unconscious. She told the guards to take him away, interrogate him properly when he wakes up. The guards all bowed and thanked Rania for her help. Rania, on the other hand, simply waved goodbye and left. Meanwhile, the magical beasts that had run out were all taken care of by the four geniuses. At this point, Lester began to worry if Assistant Professor Rania could handle Kelt. Hearing this, Lack and Princess Era both had knowing smiles on their faces. Lester was very confused by this. Princess Era smiled and comforted her. There's absolutely no need to worry about Assistant Professor Rania. The other two nodded in agreement. That's so true. Princess Era thought the assistant professor should be dealing with the mastermind by now. She would never have guessed that Rania was already back in her office, started to do laundry. After all, it was a fight. It's understandable to accidentally get some blood on it. Roselle advised Rania to be more careful. After all, it was a gift from the royal family. Rania verbally agreed readily, but with a little force, she tore it with a ripping sound. Seeing this, Professor Roselle instantly got angry. Rania repeatedly said, "The man was clearly a swordsman, yet he lost in close combat to an unarmed mage." However, the man was not unconvinced. It was only because he recognized the person before him. The magical beast rampage incident came to an end. Unexpectedly, Assistant Professor Kelt was the real mastermind. Professor Markhart was thus acquitted, but was also forbidden from continuing to use magical beasts for teaching. Rania taught her classes as usual. However, to make it easier for the students to understand, she learned many lessons from Assistant Professor Kelt, although it felt a bit unnatural. But looking at the expressions of the students in the stands, it seemed to be going quite well. Rania was in a very pleasant mood. She felt she could keep doing this job forever. But just then, a group of mysterious figures suddenly appeared before her eyes. Judging by their attire, they were the Royal Hounds, and their appearance at the Academy this time was precisely to interrogate the demonically possessed Assistant Professor Kelt. At this point, Kelt had already had a mental breakdown and completely lost his sanity. And according to the investigation, the trail behind him pointed in two directions. One was a very influential figure within the Academy. The other was a very powerful demon contractor. Meanwhile, Princess Aira suddenly woke up from a nightmare. She once again remembered being hunted as a child. Back then, the court mage Gaelic sold his soul to a demon and intended to offer the young princess, the daughter of the stars, as a sacrifice. At the critical moment, Lanier fortunately appeared and saved her, turning the traitor to dust with a single blow. The awakened young princess silently called out for Lord Lanier. At the same time, Rania, who was relaxing in a coffee shop, was suddenly startled, spitting out a mouthful of coffee. At that moment, she seemed to have an auditory hallucination. The young princess's call echoed in her ears. Rania let out a frustrated sigh. She had torn the clothes gifted by the royal family while washing them. It was hard to bring up, yet she had to tell the young princess. Meanwhile, Garrett of the Royal Hounds was patrolling the Academy. Although Kelt had already been captured, a demonic aura still lingered in the Academy. Although it was just a little, it was hard for ordinary people to detect. But Garrett had been active on the battlefield and was very good at tracking. Garrett looked around, searching for the source of the demonic aura. Suddenly, he sensed something. He whipped his head around to look. He saw the figure of a girl appear, and the demonic aura was emanating from her. It was Rania, who had just finished her coffee. Having found his target, Garrett didn't hesitate for a moment and swung his sword down at her. The powerful attack caused a violent impact on the ground. This also angered Rania, who suddenly attacks people in the middle of the road. But the moment she saw the other person's face clearly, Rania was a bit shocked. This guy is. The two of them exchanged blows. In a short time, they exchanged dozens of rounds. This scene shocked the onlookers. How is this possible? You have to know, those called the Royal Hounds are all masters in the field of close combat. They have the title of Mage Bane. Even mages specializing in combat have no chance of winning if they get close. It should have been like that. But now it was Garrett, the one who launched the surprise attack, who was being pushed back. Not only that, Garrett could clearly feel that the other person was holding back. Even with his opponent having no weapon, he had no chance of winning. The fight ended as the sword in Garrett's hand was knocked away. He looked behind him in disbelief. Suddenly, he thought of an unlikely possibility. These movements with no wasted motion. Skills that surpassed all limits. He couldn't help but silently raise his hands and surrender. Rania cracked her knuckles, annoyed, pretending not to know him. But he was quickly called out. Garrett looked at the girl opposite him. "Why have you appeared here in this form?" "My commander." A boy was hit by a curse, and his body mutated into a girl's. He never thought he'd be recognized at a glance by his former subordinate. Garrett used to be Lanier's support. With his keen sense of smell, he could quickly find mission targets. However, during one operation, they unexpectedly encountered Ganalt, the Sword of Death, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race. Although he managed to survive in the end, his body was contaminated by demonic aura. Unable to return to the battlefield, he had to retire from the front lines. Lanier, who had long guessed the outcome, took an envelope out from his clothes. This was a joint letter of recommendation from him and the Knight Commander. With it, he could directly apply for a position needed by the royal family. Finally, Lanier affirmed Garrett's contributions over the years. Garrett was moved to tears. Meeting again, he never expected that his former superior not only became a teacher, but even changed gender. Rania, displeased, told him to shut up. At this moment, Rania took out several fragments from her clothes. It was a small stone coffin she had crushed earlier, and the demonic aura Garrett sensed was emanating from it. Rania praised Garrett for finding the target so quickly. Garrett accepted with delight and asked Rania to hand over the fragments to him for investigation. Garrett had heard that his commander was kicked out of the heroes' party and was worried to death. But thinking of the past, Rania silently said it was nothing. Hearing this, Garrett burst out laughing. It couldn't be that you wrote a resignation letter and then got drunk and went crazy, right? Garrett laughed heartily, but didn't notice the expression on the person behind him. Rania placed her hand on Garrett's chest, saying she wanted to give him a piece of advice. The next moment, Garrett was hit hard and sent flying backward, and Rania had a kind smile. Don't just attack people on the street. Feeling the long-lost pain, Garrett couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. You haven't changed a bit. Meanwhile, it was almost curfew. Lester was rushing back, but a sudden voice made her turn pale with shock. Long time no see, Lester. Lester turned her head in disbelief. The person who had come was Elder Gylian of the Gray Magic Tower. Hundreds of years ago, there was a great nation called Arcadia. However, the glorious nation was destroyed overnight by 4 enemies. They were the Pitch Black Storm, the Black Dragon Belial, the Apostate Gretas, the Sword of Death Ganalt, and the ancient Lich Scuber. Afterward, people built a new nation, Garudia, on the ruins. At the same time, they gathered all sorts of geniuses. Among them, the mages established magic towers. The 6 at the pinnacle were granted colors by the royal family: yellow, red, cyan, black, purple, and gray. The other colors each have their own area of expertise. Only gray accepts members regardless of origin or school of thought. Their main purpose is to revive ancient magic. Elder Gylian is currently the most influential elder of the Gray Magic Tower. However, this old geezer looked down on Lester, the heir to the magic tower. Seeing him, Lester remembered the fear of being dominated in the past. The purpose of his appearance this time was to revoke Lester's status as heir and have Roselle's disciple, Rania, take over because her performance was more perfect. And this undoubtedly dealt a huge blow to Lester. The scene changes. Rania was drinking tea in the coffee shop as usual. However, the increasing number of people in the coffee shop was making her feel irritated. She was considering whether to change places. Unexpectedly, the next moment, the students were all asked to leave. Looking at the empty coffee shop, Rania wondered what on earth had happened. Then she saw an old geezer sit down in front of her. It was Elder Gylian of the Gray Magic Tower. Seeing this, Rania sighed helplessly. I was wondering what happened. I didn't expect this old fellow Gylian to come looking for me directly. Gylian got straight to the point and took out a black envelope. Rania showed a surprised expression. As a mage of the Gray Magic Tower, she of course knew what this meant. Accepting this letter of recommendation would make her the next master of the Magic Tower. Faced with such a temptation, an ordinary person would have certainly accepted with joy. However, Rania showed no interest at all. Seeing this, Gylian urged her impatiently. But the next moment, Rania responded directly with her actions. She picked up her coffee and poured it directly on the letter. This scene made Gylian furious. What are you doing? But Rania just watched him calmly. The girl clearly had the potential to become one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race. Yet she had always lived under the gazes of a group of people who looked at her like an ant. She worked harder than anyone else every day, just to gain the elders' approval. However, what she got in the end was their abandonment. Learning of the elders' decision, Lester worked even harder, not even leaving herself time to rest. The little spirit beside her felt heartbroken watching her. The little spirit desperately tugged at Lester's clothes, hoping she would at least take a short nap. However, even after studying until she coughed up blood, she forced herself to work even harder, just to satisfy that group of high and mighty old geezers, until her body finally couldn't take it anymore and she collapsed. Meanwhile, facing Gylian's invitation, Rania rejected it directly with her actions. Seeing this, Gylian stood up in anger. Is this your answer? However, Rania was not afraid at all. So what if it is? Rania's attitude made him very dissatisfied. He was going to teach her a lesson. Of course, before that, Jillian kindly gave her one last chance. Accept my. Before he could finish, Rania cut him off. Stop with the nonsense. I refuse. The enraged Jillian said no more. He wanted to teach her a lesson on the spot. However, Rania merely flicked her finger. The next moment, a shocked Jillian discovered that his spell had failed. And at that moment, Rania's hand was releasing the exact same magic. Jillian had a look of disbelief. How is this possible? The next moment, he couldn't withstand the pressure and knelt before Rania. Rania spoke coldly. That child is more than capable of her position. As an elder of the Gray Magic Tower, don't tell me you really can't see her talent? Or have your old eyes become so dim that you can only see power? At this moment, Rania had a contemptuous look on her face. How unbecoming, Elder Jillian. Having taught the old geezer a small lesson, Rania coolly turned and left. The scene changes to the midterm exams. The students gathered around the exam questions, looking at each other. A problem that was very simple in Rania's eyes had all the geniuses stumped. Seeing this, Rania sighed helplessly. They still have a long way to go. At this moment, Lester walked by with her head down. Her condition was a bit strange. Rania worriedly asked her if she was feeling unwell. But in Lester's dazed mind, Rania had already colluded with the elder. So she pretended not to hear and ran off under Rania's surprised gaze. Suddenly, Garrett appeared behind Rania, bringing the distracted Rania back to her senses. Startled, Rania turned her head and stared at him with displeasure. You're finally back. It turned out Garrett had been investigating the matter of the altar, and the appearance of the altar meant that a calamity would soon occur. Even destroying it couldn't stop it. It would only end when all the enemies that appear are eliminated. At this moment, Garrett smiled and looked at Rania. Speaking of which, wherever you go, Commander, trouble seems to follow. Hearing this, Rania kicked out. Are you saying it's my fault? A certain Death God Elementary School student would agree. To deal with the impending calamity, the hero's party was recalled to the capital. And the hero Carl was most concerned about whether that gray person would come. The guard leading them said that person wasn't here. Carl felt it was a bit strange because the stars were telling him which way to go to run into that person. At this time, the academy was also preparing for the calamity. However, the principal only recalled the teachers who were away and strengthened the academy's barrier. This was already all they could do, because there was no way to stop the ritual from proceeding. At that time, the gate to the demon world will be opened through a medium, and the academy is the center of this incident. Right now, they can only minimize the losses as much as possible and protect the students. At this moment, the students, still unaware that something big was about to happen, were all scratching their heads. Looking at the exam questions before them, their minds just felt blank. Suddenly, Lack noticed someone walking past him. He quickly called out, "Lester, have you solved it already?" However, Lester just walked past coldly. Her attitude was somewhat surprising. Lack, with his sharp sixth sense, felt that something bad was about to happen, but he was pulled back by a word from Belle. Let's solve the problem in front of us first. The two didn't realize that Lester was already on the verge of turning to the dark side. On the other side, Rania was waiting for the ritual to begin, but she learned from Garrett beside her that the hero's party had also been recalled because of this matter. Garrett was worried that Rania would go looking for trouble with them. However, Rania just sighed. Geez, I thought it was something serious. At this moment, Rania had a kind smile. What do you take me for? Am I the kind of person who can't prioritize? Then she magnanimously said to leave the cleanup job to them. In fact, Rania had already guessed who the medium was this time. She just didn't want to interfere carelessly, because that would be even more dangerous. A single misstep could add a 4 Heavenly Kings level figure to the demon race. Because in terms of talent alone, the other person was even stronger than her. However, the old geezers of the Gray Magic Tower were all blind. And at this moment, Lester, who had returned to her room, found a strange envelope on her desk. Lester was curious who would give her something like this. When she opened it, a set of magic circuits appeared before her. It was the exam question Rania had carefully prepared. Lester recognized what it was at a glance. A reinforced multi-layered defense plus a counterattack. It seemed to be for protecting something. She stared intently at the circuits in her hand. What a perfect combination. And just then, a demonic figure suddenly appeared behind her. The little spirit Sylphie beside her was swatted away with one palm. Oh, little girl who follows the lowly gray. It's time for you to go where you belong. The chance to soar to the heavens is right before you, and the price is merely to give up being human. How will you choose? Knowing that Lester would be used as a medium and pulled into another dimension, Rania, as her teacher, did nothing. Although that child was a coward, Rania firmly believed she could get through it. After all, without enough willpower, it would be impossible to endure for several years in the cruel gray magic tower. Proud mages are fools who would never run away or admit defeat, even if they are beaten. When Lester woke up, she found herself in a different dimension. The lingering spirits of the elders were still chattering incessantly in her ears. Her spirit once broke down. She just wanted to get away from this annoying world. However, the next moment, she remembered her master. As a child, she had shown extraordinary magical talent, was discovered by her master, and taken in as a disciple. At that time, she was full of hope for life. However, the good times didn't last. Her master eventually grew old. From then on, her life lost its light. She clearly had plenty of reasons to turn to the dark side, but at the critical moment, she held on to her true self. Because her master had said that as a mage, one cannot be immersed in past sorrows. One must bravely face the future. As Lester, with her fighting spirit rekindled, called out loudly, the little spirit Sylphie crossed through space and appeared before her master. The two joyfully embraced each other. And this undoubtedly enraged the mastermind. You clearly could have become as strong as me just by doing nothing. Looking at the giant skeleton figure before her, Lester recognized him. You are the ancient Lich Scuber. Scuber advised her not to put up a pointless struggle and to obediently accept the power. However, facing the temptation, Lester did not waver in the slightest. She directly summoned her companions and ordered them to charge at the enemy. However, the level difference between the two was too great. Scuber wiped out all the pet beasts with a wave of his hand. Seeing this, Lester's eyes widened in disbelief. At this point, Scuber was no longer holding back. A giant bone claw reached for Lester. Lester closed her eyes in despair. Is this how it ends? In the nick of time, a magic seal suddenly appeared in her mind. Following it, a multi-layered magic defense appeared by her side. This was Assistant Professor Rania's magic circuit. It turned out she had foreseen everything. Looking at the suddenly appearing magic circle, Lester couldn't help but shed tears. So there was someone who still cared about me. In contrast, Scuber, sensing a familiar aura, became enraged. It's that hateful gray person again. Furious, it ordered the stars to fulfill the contract and eliminate external interference. But it was denied by the stars. There is no anomaly here. Hearing this, Scuber completely lost his composure. That damn person is interfering with me again. The violent roar made Lester involuntarily cover her ears. The next moment, the space shattered like glass. A familiar forest appeared before her eyes. At the same time, a magic seal lit up on the back of Rania's hand. Rania smiled faintly. Everything was as expected. Next, it was her turn to take the stage. Rania held her hand out to Garrett, letting him, with his keen sense of smell, take a whiff. Then, she successfully located the target and created a guide with her magic. Rania let out a long sigh. First, I'll go find that coward. Following the magic guide, Rania began to leap rapidly through the trees. Stop hiding. Come on out, coward. At this moment, Lester, who had escaped from the other dimension, shakily emerged, leaning on a tree. Although she was weak all over, she had to leave this place as soon as possible. She couldn't get caught again. Suddenly, her head spun. Her body uncontrollably fell backward, but was caught by a hand. Lester was startled and quickly looked up. It was Assistant Professor Rania. Rania reached out her hand to dispel the demonic aura from Lester. Then she teleported her away. You've worked hard, Lester. Just as she finished, Scuber appeared. You want to face me alone? You detestable gray. Seeing the detestable person again, Scuber was furious. Every time, it was this person who came out to ruin his plans. If it weren't for her, the capital would have been taken down long ago. Scuber questioned loudly. Why do you have to break all of my barriers? Hearing this, Rania smiled confidently. Of course, it's because you're too weak. A lich who has lived for 1,000 years, encountered a girl in her 20s, and then the immortal one died. Looking at the gray mage standing before him again, Scuber found it incredible. You were clearly hit by the Star Shadow's curse. Why are you still alive? Not only did you withstand the curse of my god, but you can still stand here in human form. Even I almost died back then and ended up in this state. And Rania, on the other side, had finally found the culprit who caused her body's mutation. Now, she just wanted to kill this skeleton head in front of her. Rania only recently learned that she was the founder of the combat division, and this combat style was specifically designed to defeat Scuber, because the opponent was an ancient lich who had lived for 1,000 years. It's impossible to win against him with normal magic. So, to shorten the magic casting time, she turned spells into circuits and inscribed them into her body. To avoid elemental disadvantages, she used close combat as her main attack method. In the end, Rania walked the path of a close combat mage. Of course, it's impossible to defeat the Sword of Death or the Black Dragon with this method, but against a mage of the same level, it's impossible to lose. As expected, the Lich was terrible at close combat. He was taken down by Rania effortlessly. Rania, victorious in battle, felt like her bones were about to fall apart, so she decisively summoned the scales to make a trade. In exchange for her magic power, she eliminated her physical pain. Sure enough, the next moment, Rania was instantly restored to her original state. Taking advantage of Rania's great loss of magic power, Scuber resiliently got back up. Immediately, a bone cage trapped Rania inside. Scuber didn't understand how she could be like a normal person when she was under the Star Shadow's curse. However, the next moment, a voice came with a cracking sound. The bone cage shattered, and Rania's spotless figure appeared. What on earth is this Star Shadow you're talking about? Hearing this, Scuber's eyes widened in shock. You withstood the curse without knowing anything about it? Hearing this, Rania flew into a rage. In what way does this look like I've withstood the curse? However, Scuber still couldn't believe it. That curse should corrode flesh and blood and devour the spirit. It should make one bleed from all 7 orifices and wish for death. Hearing this, Rania instantly understood. Oh, you're talking about this. She snapped her fingers. Then, a mass of dark demonic aura appeared beside her. Seeing this, Scuber simply couldn't believe his eyes. How the hell did you do that? Rania smiled and said, I just gave a little try, and unexpectedly, it worked. This humble brag of a statement made Scuber completely lose his composure. I'm tired. Let's just destroy it all. This damn world. The next moment, Scuber appeared directly at the bottom of the fountain of magic. He was going to drain all the magic here. Rania was curious what price he would have to pay. This didn't seem like something a clone could do. If this continued, not only would the academy be finished, but the entire royal capital would be razed to the ground. The lunatics in the Demon Lord's army are always like this. They self-destruct at the slightest disagreement. But fortunately, Rania was no ordinary person. The deal with the stars has no problem. But every spell has a loophole, and Rania has a pair of eyes skilled at finding them. Loophole found. As Rania threw a reinforced punch towards a certain point, the surrounding barrier shattered, and Scuber's figure appeared again. Looking at the Lich before her, Rania gave him the final respect. For the very end, let's settle this with magic. Scuber unwillingly shouted, stop. However, Rania continued without mercy. In the end, Scuber unwillingly turned to ash under countless spells. Meanwhile, countless low and mid-tier summon monsters attacked the academy. The hero Karl arranged for the Saintess Sarah to stay behind and protect the students. The elf Remia helped deal with the skeleton soldiers, and the hero Karl himself headed straight for the center of the altar. However, when he arrived, all he saw was a devastated battlefield. Traces of a battle like this. Only that person could have done it. Having figured it out, Karl instantly vanished, leaping swiftly through the forest, wanting to see that person again. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the distance. Karl thought it was Lanier, so he instantly appeared in front of them. But Karl was surprised to find he had mistaken the person. Seeing the familiar face again, Rania looked disgusted. After a moment of silence, Karl was the first to ask who she was. However, the person opposite him coldly told him to get out of the way. Seeing the hero didn't react, Rania became angry. Are you deaf? The hero who defeated the Demon Lord unexpectedly ran into a strange girl. And then, the hero got beaten up. The hero Karl was trying to find traces of Lanier, but he ran into Rania, who had just finished off the Lich. Karl came up and grabbed Rania's wrist, demanding to know who she was. The arrogant behavior made Rania very angry. What a damn bastard. Suddenly, Rania froze. He actually didn't recognize her. Garrett had recognized her identity at a glance, but Karl, who had the same eyes, did not. With his personality, it was impossible that he was joking. Rania suppressed her anger and told him to let go, but he didn't budge at all. Rania angrily broke free. Does Lord Hero not understand human language? But at this moment, Carl actually bowed to apologize, saying he didn't expect someone to be hostile towards him. Hearing this, Rania mocked him without holding back. Just because you're the hero, everyone should accommodate you? Lord Hero's apology is truly an eye-opener. After saying that, Rania turned to leave. Suddenly, Rania stopped in her tracks because a voice came from behind. Lanier. Carl looked at her back. What is your relationship with Lanier? Rania didn't want to bother with him, but he just had to bring up the sore subject. His body must be in a lot of discomfort right now, right? Hearing this, Rania instantly felt rage surge to her head. Isn't this all because of you useless teammates? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Next, the hero Carl was brutally beaten. The scene changes. Garrett finds Rania and worriedly asks if she's hurt. Rania casually lifts a demonic beast, saying she took care of the enemy without getting a scratch. Rania is still very annoyed that I should have hit him a few more times. Garrett asks in confusion, "Are you talking about Scuba?" Hearing this, Rania raises her blood-stained right hand. How can you get blood from hitting a skeleton? Thinking of that infuriating guy, Rania looks at Garrett beside her, and a question arises in her mind. So she asks him directly, "How did you recognize me back then?" When I think about it, it should have been impossible. Even my own master couldn't recognize me. Hearing this, Garrett takes a small notebook out of his coat. It turns out he has an occupational hazard. He often records people's quirks and subconscious actions. Garrett wants to explain in detail, but Rania, her face darkening, refuses. This unexpected encounter with the hero Carl allowed Rania to finally confirm one thing. The stars do not recognize her as Lanier. Meanwhile, the other two members of the hero's party came looking for him, only to find Carl's face beaten and disfigured. Seeing this, the saintess Sarah hurries forward to heal him, while the elf Remia observes the surroundings. The battle with Scuba is over, but there are no signs of the holy sword being used at the scene. Suddenly, the two stare with wide, shocked eyes because Carl says that Scuba was defeated by that person. The two refuse to acknowledge the excellence of the person they once drove away. So they turn and leave, pretending nothing happened. Meanwhile, Carl has already confirmed that the girl is Lanier. It turns out he was deliberately provoking her earlier. If it were Lanier, he wouldn't have been able to resist. Sure enough, that person's movements, or the unique composition of their spells, they were exactly the same. The only difference was their gender. However, even though Carl felt his analysis should be correct, the judgment of the stars denied that they were the same person. Carl looks at the broken link and falls into self-doubt. Could it really be my imagination? She was originally a lofty saintess in the eyes of outsiders, always living under the admiring gazes of those around her, until she unexpectedly met a strange girl. And then she had cold water poured over her head. With the demonic beast incident completely resolved, the people of the royal capital were overjoyed. It was simply unbelievable that such a serious incident resulted in no casualties. People speculated that it was the hero Carl who defeated Scuba, and to this, the hero's party shamelessly accepted the credit. However, Princess Era didn't think so. Because according to the Hound's investigation, the scene was filled with traces of impact-type magic. A distinct gray magic power lingered in the area, yet there wasn't a single trace of the holy sword being used. In summary, there was reason to believe that the gray magic user Lanier had eliminated Scuba. In other words, the hero's party had stolen Lanier's credit. After reading the report, Princess Era was deeply aware of the hero party's shamelessness. And because Lanier didn't want to return to his former life, he sent a letter asking the princess to keep it a secret for him. Princess Era had no choice but to silently watch his credit be stolen. But besides that, what was more important right now was the mountain of work. I really want to experience a full 7-day vacation. Meanwhile, the principal was in high spirits. He had already prepared for the worst, but in the end, not a single person died. Even the demonic energy the students were tainted with was purified by the saintess. It was simply a miracle. Roselle watched the beaming principal from the side. So, why did you call me here? It turns out the principal heard that Rania was also corrupted by demonic energy while saving the students. So he wanted to ask the saintess to help purify her. However, before he could finish, Roselle forcefully cut him off. Roselle looked extremely serious, and they absolutely cannot meet, no matter what. The principal looked confused that I asked this some kind of serious incident. He couldn't understand it at all. He was just trying to be helpful. Little did he know, Roselle was worried to death. If the two of them met, someone might die, and he was sure that person would be the saintess. For this reason, he had repeatedly warned Rania not to wander around recently. Meanwhile, Rania was getting a headache grading the students' midterm exams. At a glance, not a single one was correct. An irritated Rania threw the door open, ready to go out for some fresh air, and ended up startling Lester outside. Rania looked at Lester in surprise. "Are you all right now?" Lester said expectantly that she had something to tell her. Hearing this, Rania grinned. "Then let's go to the cafe and talk." Afterward, as the two walked to the cafe, Lester couldn't help but fall back into the memory of being kidnapped by Scuba. She only snapped out of it when Rania called her name. Seeing her dazed look, Rania pushed her down onto a bench. "What do you want to drink?" "I'll go buy it." Hearing this, Lester said she'd have the same as the assistant professor. Rania waved to show she understood and headed towards the cafe. But the moment she walked in, she saw the person she hated most in her life. Instantly, her good mood vanished. What a terrible day, to run into this disgusting woman here, of all places. The Saintess Sarah possessed God-given cherry blossom-colored hair and emerald eyes that represented new life. In people's hearts, she was an ideal being created by the gods. Little did they know that beneath this perfect exterior hid a hypocritical soul. To defeat the demon army as quickly as possible, she could mercilessly use a village as bait, just to end things quickly and avoid getting covered in dust. In her heart, it was their honor to be able to offer their lives for her. And this was what the former Lanier hated most about her. In short, this was a saintess whose abilities were fine, but whose character was questionable. Of course, in the eyes of outsiders, she was still a perfect being. In the saintess's mind, people should look at her with gazes of admiration and goodwill, not with hostility like this person. The saintess really couldn't understand. They had clearly never met, so why was this person looking at her with such eyes? Could it be? She's my fan. She's so excited to see me in person that her expression has become distorted. Thinking she had figured out the truth, the saintess proactively went to greet her, completely unaware of the dark aura behind the other person, so thick it was visible to the naked eye. Rania suppressed the urge to attack, tilted her head, and said she wasn't a religious person. Hearing this, the saintess instantly felt offended. "Yes, that's so?" Then, the saintess picked up a cup of scalding coffee. My hand slipped. Drenched, Rania could no longer hold back that you're the one who started it. The next moment, before her terrified eyes, Rania grabbed her by the hair. Ignoring the saintess's frantic shouts, she grabbed the nearby coffee. Immediately after, a sharp scream reached the outside. Lester broke out in a cold sweat that I hope nothing bad is happening. The saintess was now in a pathetic state, collapsed on the ground with a coffee cup stuck on her head. Having finally vented, Rania looked relieved. The saintess shouldn't mind a fan's little accident, right? Hearing this, the saintess stared at her in disbelief. What is wrong with this woman? In a much better mood, Rania walked out with 2 cups of coffee. She then handed one to Lester and sat down beside her. "Now, let me hear what you wanted to say." 2 young women sat on a bench on a date, yet they were talking about a man who lived in the past. Lester wanted to learn from Rania what kind of person Lanier was, and why he was able to win the approval of the Magic Tower's elders. Little did she know that the person sitting next to her was Lanier himself. Rania said, "The two of you are very similar, because the Grey Magic Tower is a very cruel place. Those high and mighty figures look down on them for their common origins. So, to shove it in their faces, Lanier studied desperately, and also to prove that that person's choice was not wrong in any way. In this respect, her situation was similar to Lester's now. Lester looked at Assistant Professor Rania beside her. "You two must have been really close. You talk about him as if you were him." Hearing this, Rania almost choked on her coffee. Rania looked guilty. "Did I ask that so?" Then, Rania cleared her throat and said Lester was doing well. Lester happily thanked Rania for her explanation. Rania then took out a key and handed it to Lester as a reward for getting first place on the exam. It was the key to a drawer in Lanier's research lab, which contained some of his research findings. She told Lester that the next time the old men gave her trouble, she should take out what's inside and throw it in their faces. Lester never expected to be first place, let alone receive such an important reward. For a moment, she was at a loss for what to do. On the way back, Rania asked Lester, "The exam wasn't too hard, was it?" But she was met with silence. That night, Rania went to Garrett's potion shop. The two ate fruit and drank strong liquor. Before long, Rania was drunk. Garrett wondered why she had come over, since she shouldn't have run out of potions yet. Rania tried to cover it up. Oh, I need a reason to see a friend? But he mercilessly exposed her. You would never come see me if there was nothing wrong. Having been found out, Rania no longer hid it. A mass of demonic energy appeared in her palm. She had learned from Scuba that this was the curse of the Star Shadow. Rania wanted to know what the Star Shadow was. She felt that Garrett definitely knew. Garrett didn't deny it, but within the limits allowed by the stars, she couldn't say anything useful because she was bound by countless restrictions, a treatment reserved only for the most powerful beings. Besides, Garrett also had something to ask Rania. I wonder if you've ever met the martyr, Glyceria. Hearing this, Rania was a little confused. Shouldn't it be the apostate, Gretus? But speaking of the apostate, she had indeed met her. She remembered that Gretus had directly occupied Rodmire Fortress. The soldiers on the front lines had no choice but to request support from the hero's party. Before the hero arrived, the Sword Saint Kentel was responsible for clearing out the small fry. However, the Sword Saint was old, after all, and ended up suffering serious injuries. Lanier, who had come as support, anxiously ran to check on the old man. The hero who followed bowed deeply. It turned out the Sword Saint was the hero's master. Seeing the little kid who had learned swordsmanship from him now standing on his own, the Sword Saint was very gratified. Although there was much to say, now was clearly not the time. The appearance of the apostate was the top priority. The Sword Saint had previously tried to infiltrate the fortress. However, in just an instant, the weapon that had been with him his whole life was covered in scars. The Sword Saint apologized for hastily summoning them. Lanier didn't mind at all. He and the others were already used to it. Besides, it was difficult for a swordsman to face a summoner alone. Unlike Scuba, who could appear on the battlefield at any time, the apostate Gretus hadn't appeared for several hundred years. However, every time she appeared, she brought devastating disasters. Lanier decided to check the situation first. As a precaution, he also dragged along the Saintess, with whom he didn't get along. With Lanier's departure, only the master and disciple were left in the tent. The Sword Saint looked at his disciple. Sometimes, that guy is more like a hero than you are. Hearing this, Carl, though unwilling, had to admit that the other's mind was better. His judgment was sometimes more accurate than his own, even when listening to the guidance of the stars. Hearing the word stars, the Sword Saint advised his disciple not to rely on them too much. At that time, Carl still didn't understand his master's words. On the other side, Lanier and the Saintess arrived not far from the fortress. The Saintess questioned why they had to infiltrate. That wouldn't it be better to set a trap like we did with the Black Dragon? Hearing this, Lanier covered his face with a headache, worried about his teammates' intelligence. But he had no choice but to explain. Unlike the Black Dragon, we know nothing about the apostate, only that her appearance is always accompanied by fog, which is a completely useless piece of information. Lanier roared to the Saintess, "Don't be so perfunctory just because you don't want to work overtime." The Saintess sighed, saying she just wanted to slack off. However, the next moment, the Saintess suddenly asked, "What about the knights inside?" Lanier never would have thought that this selfish woman would actually care about others. To this, Lanier said, not to worry. They had no chance of survival. But the Saintess's next words made his eyes widen in shock. They're still alive. I can hear their prayers. They are begging the gods to take their lives. Having obtained this important information, Lanier and the elf Remia infiltrated to investigate, only to be met with an extremely foul smell. Even thinking back on it now, the memory still lingers. It felt similar to the solvents commonly used in experiments. Hearing this, Garrett fell silent. Then she got up and went to the shelf, picking up a small bottle. The next moment, that pungent smell went from memory to reality. Rania was almost suffocated. She covered her mouth and nose, fighting the urge to vomit. That's the smell. Put away quickly. The guess was confirmed. She never thought Glyceria would actually take that step. Rania was curious about what it was. Garrett then brought over a docile little white mouse to let her see for herself. As a drop of liquid fell onto the mouse, but its form began to change drastically, and its personality became aggressive. It turned out to be a fusion potion, capable of creating a new species. It turns out that witches also have their own death knights. Whenever a witch is bullied, that what awaits the enemy is the sharpest sword in this world. When Lanier first encountered Gretus, he found she was creating demonic beasts. So he hurried back to camp, called a meeting, and told everyone to attack her immediately. It wasn't a problem for a summoner to create demonic beasts. The problem was the materials she was using. The corpse left behind by the defeated black dragon Belial, one of the 4 heavenly kings, as well as the flesh, blood, and souls of the holy knights in the fortress. Once she finished fusing them, it would create another difficult boss. Hearing this, everyone finally realized the seriousness of the situation. So the next day, the heroes' party began a full-scale assault. The group fought their way through, bathed in blood. They finally reached Gretus. Gretus, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race, was a summoner. They thought she would be a glass cannon without her familiars. Lanier clenched his fists and charged forward, but she didn't even pay him any mind, instead looking at the hero in the party. Seeing his attack was ineffective, Lanier broke out in a cold sweat. Carl even started to tremble from her gaze. Gretus slowly took a few steps towards them. Then she suddenly vanished on the spot, reappearing almost in the hero's face. "Oh, you're the one who defeated the black dragon." Then Gretus flicked her finger, and a small black dragon was summoned. Gretus looked happy that "I hope you can entertain me." The hero's party's operation failed. A complete failure. The hero Carl and the 2 girls had been beaten so badly they had completely lost their confidence. Only Lanier still had the will to fight. Even though he was heavily injured, one arm clearly twisted, he couldn't believe that, even with multiple magic enhancements, that a single blow from the opponent could cause so much damage. The Saintess was already scared out of her wits. She gripped Lanier's injured hand tightly. "Why don't we run?" Lanier looked at her, speechless. "What are you talking about?" The Saintess said she didn't want to go and die for nothing. Anyway, with Carl around, we could defeat that calamity sooner or later. The elf Remia also thought the Saintess had a point. Right now, they had no chance of winning. However, Lanier mercilessly shook off the Saintess. He angrily told her to shut up, absolutely refusing to give up, because the hero is a symbol of victory in people's hearts. And facing calamities head-on is the hero's duty. Having calmed down, Lanier asked the others to buy him 15 seconds. The hero said it would be no problem if it was just Gretus, but there were too many armor dragons. Hearing this, Lanier got up and walked out of the tent. He was going to find someone who could help hold back the armor dragons. The operation began once more. Looking at the dense crowd of demonic beasts in the square, that the soldiers were all terrified and at a loss. Fortunately, the Sword Saint stepped forward in time. He then led the soldiers to hold back the armor dragons, clearing a path for the hero's party. The group ignored the small fry and launched their assault. This time, Lanier successfully bound Gretus with magic, as well as the 2-headed black dragon with its explosive combat power. Next, Carl decisively drew the holy sword. With one slash, he cut off Gretus's right hand, which she used for summoning. Seeing her right hand fall to the ground, thought the hero Carl was about to stab her through the heart, but suddenly found his holy sword being corroded by dark magic energy, and the severed hand on the ground began to emit a thick black fog. Then, before Lanier's disbelieving eyes, that the sword of death, Ganault, appeared out of thin air. He looked down at the hero. That "Aren't you going to raise your sword?" It turned out Gretus had directly sacrificed her right arm to open a special channel. Then, her body also reached its limit. "It's a pity I'm not done playing, but at least I can let you have some fun." With that, Gretus fell into a deep sleep. Ganault carefully caught her. At this moment, he was like a knight protecting his princess. Next, those who dared to harm the princess would face judgment. Ganault raised the greatsword in his hand and mercilessly swung it at his opponent. But the hero, having lost the protection of the stars, didn't even have the courage to keep holding his sword. Just as the hero was about to be taken out, the Sword Saint appeared in time to block the fatal blow. He stood with his back to his disciple. "Carl, didn't I tell you? Don't rely too much on the stars." Taking advantage of Gretus being unconscious, the Sword Saint told Lanier to take the demoralized Carl and flee immediately while he stayed behind to cover their retreat. Although unwilling, Lanier also knew the gravity of the situation. He decisively took Carl and the holy sword and turned to leave. "Stay alive, old man." At this moment, the light had gone out of Carl's eyes. Why? His master was about to die in battle right before his eyes, yet he didn't even have the courage to hold his sword. After several decades, the Sword Saint once again stood before Ganault, and Ganault also recognized the sword in the Sword Saint's hand. It was the sword of the Holy Land. It turned out the Sword Saint had faced the sword of death 30 years ago. Back then, he didn't even have the courage to raise his sword in front of him. Even though his hometown was turned to scorched earth and all his comrades were dead, he threw away his sword to save his own life. Ganelt felt such a person was not worthy of him drawing his sword, and so the young sword saint managed to survive. But now, he finally gripped the sword in his hand and stood before him once more. Looking at the coward from the past, Ganelt swung his sword to test if he was worthy of being a proper swordsman. Facing Ganelt's casual strike, the sword saint didn't dare to block it head-on. The sword saint noticed that his opponent was using his sword like a blunt weapon, so he chose to settle it with swordsmanship. The two went back and forth for an unknown amount of time. The sword saint gradually fell into a disadvantage. He was old, after all. He couldn't win a battle of attrition against a death knight, but he had no regrets. As long as the kid survived, that was enough. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the other side. "What is your name?" At this point, Ganelt acknowledged him as a worthy swordsman. The sword saint also knew the final moment had come. He shouted his name loudly, Cortel of the Richtner style. Hearing this, Ganelt also stated his own name, as a sign of a swordsman's highest respect. This scene was very much like when Hawkeye acknowledged Zorro. Then, to the sword saint's astonishment, Ganelt used a familiar sword technique. In that moment, the sword saint suddenly understood. Ganelt had also once been an inheritor of the sword of the Holy Land. Afterward, as expected, the sword saint was defeated, but his sword also pierced Ganelt's chest, just 1 centimeter from his heart. "I'll leave the rest to you, Carl," merely to secure his own position. But the scumbag brother actually eliminated his 2 younger sisters one after another. He didn't even plan to spare the first princess, who had already given up her right of succession. Sensing her end was near, the first princess had no choice but to seek protection from Rania. After Rania finished telling Garrett about her fight with Gretus, Garrett looked at the drunk Rania and said she understood. "My story is finished. Now you have to tell me what the Star Shadow is." Garrett was silent for a moment, then finally spoke. "Mages create spells through transactions with the stars. Therefore, all spells contain starlight. But everything in the world has its opposite. The Star Shadow is the concept opposite to starlight. It uses the stars as a medium to devour everything." Rania wanted to ask more, but Garrett said that was all she could say. Hearing this, Rania was almost furious, but we've only just begun. To vent her frustration, Rania took out Garrett's prize collection with a wicked grin. Under her pained gaze, that she drank until dawn. The next day, Rania experienced the bitter consequences of a hangover. The teacher's expression was quite terrifying because she had forgotten about an invitation for today. It was from the Holy Land of the Magic Society, the Ivory Tower. However, Rania was very resistant to it, because the mages of the Magic Tower focused on the efficiency of circuits, while the people here always criticized them for lacking artistry. Because of this, Rania had clashed with them several times in the past. She didn't want to go at all, but she had to for her master's sake. Arriving at the Ivory Tower, a young woman with glasses led the way. Looking at the artistic but completely impractical circuits on the walls, Rania couldn't help but sigh. These guys really haven't changed a bit, until she stood in front of a familiar piece of work. At that moment, the guide felt she had met a kindred spirit. She began to introduce it with an excited face. "This is a great work gifted to the Ivory Tower by the gray magic user, Lanier." Hearing this, Rania was petrified. It was a circuit made just to annoy them, artistic but utterly useless. She never thought they would like it so much. Rania looked helpless, as long as you're happy. Arriving at the conference room, the higher-ups were already waiting. Facing her seniors, Rania bowed politely. Then she began to explain the magic circuit she had created. This circuit seemed very complex, but as long as one's fundamentals were solid, it could be easily deciphered. Rania's explanation was perfect, almost ready to be published in an academic journal, but it had no artistic merit whatsoever. It would have been fine with just a few modifications. The professors of the Ivory Tower placed particular importance on this one thing. Rania really couldn't understand. Suddenly, a voice of praise came from the side. "What a perfect circuit. Much better than the trash displayed in the hallway." Hearing this, Rania looked to the side in surprise. She hadn't noticed at all that Her Highness, the first princess of the kingdom, Lure, was here. In the past, she had wanted to meet this princess who had voluntarily given up her right to the throne, because she had the honor of seeing her once when Carl drew the holy sword. But at that time, the princess had said the most heartless words with the most beautiful smile. Someone as unremarkable as you can become the hero? It seems this world is beyond saving. Hearing the princess's evaluation of Carl back then, Lanier had laughed until he cried. He never expected to see her here. At this moment, Her Highness the First Princess continued to speak amiably. Did you not hear me? It seems your ears aren't working well. Hearing this, the old-timers, though admitting the circuit's value was immeasurable and its composition and effect were perfect. But the most important thing was that it lacked beauty. The first princess sighed helplessly. These people really haven't improved at all. Sometimes, simplicity is also a form of beauty. Next, the first princess asked Rania to demonstrate for these foolish professors another kind of beauty of this circuit. Rania was silent for a moment, then began to act. As Rania fully expanded the complex circuit, countless simple circuits appeared behind her. At this moment, the professors finally saw its inner beauty. Satisfied with the result, the princess got up to leave. Before leaving, she didn't forget to turn back and invite Rania to join her. Hearing this, Rania was stunned. She confirmed in disbelief, "Me?" And the princess gave an affirmative answer. "Yes. A private conversation between just you and me." The two went to the small garden for tea. Rania was full of questions. With no one else around, the princess began to describe her situation. She had a scumbag father who only knew how to fool around with women all day, and a scumbag brother who was even worse than her scumbag father. In fact, the royal family was already rotten from the inside, and the reason she gave up her right to the throne was a choice she had to make in order to survive. Because her two younger sisters have been brutally murdered, and now her idiot brother is preparing to make a move on her, even though she has given up her right to the throne. She isn't afraid of death, but she has to protect the child who is still alive. Rania was curious why the other party would seek her help. The princess praised her for her intelligence. She felt that someone was already targeting her, but she couldn't find any clues. Therefore, she needed the help of someone with exceptionally powerful magic, and it had to be someone her brother had never had contact with. Rania was curious why the princess trusted her, since they had never met. It turned out she learned from the princess that it was a recommendation from Princess Era. The first princess had a feeling that something would happen to her within 3 days. So she asked Rania to protect her for 3 days. As long as she could stay alive, she could have whatever she wanted. Although Rania already knew the royal family was in decline, she never expected it to be this rotten. That night, she went to the princess's palace alone. Led by a maid, she came to a dilapidated warehouse. Because the princess had too many enemies, she could only choose a place like this. Then, the princess had a guard deliver an outfit, since she couldn't be easily discovered. Rania fell silent as she looked at the clothes in her hands. But Her Highness, the first princess, had a bright smile on her face. "Since you're going to be my personal bodyguard, you'll naturally need a corresponding identity." Rania never would have thought that she would one day have to wear a maid's outfit. The prince, in order to consolidate his position, actually carved summoning circuits onto his sisters' bodies, summoning magical beasts at the cost of their lives. The third princess, once as beautiful as a flower, withered like one. The second princess, who had no interest in power and was dedicated to martial arts, also died in the jaws of a beast. To investigate the cause of her sisters' deaths, the first princess, who had ordinary talent, went to the ivory tower, which specialized in researching circuits. But she didn't find any clues. She already had a premonition that her time was running out. Fortunately, at this time, she met Rania, whom her fourth sister admired. So the first princess requested Rania to be her personal bodyguard. Rania looked at the maid outfit in her hands, very reluctantly. The princess's head, maid, didn't quite understand why she was so resistant. Little did she know what a great challenge it was for someone who was once a man to wear a maid's outfit. Rania wanted to argue her case, but was mercilessly refused. Because they had just recently hired a batch of new maids, it would be the easiest way to hide her identity, making it difficult for those with ill intentions toward Her Highness to distinguish her. As she spoke, she opened a box. Inside were a headband and a wig that had been prepared long ago. After changing into the maid outfit, Rania went to the princess's study. The princess looked up at her and felt the outfit was very suitable. Rania casually set up a soundproof barrier. The princess asked Rania to stay by her side for the next few days to help her eliminate the threats around her. Rania confirmed with the princess when she should act. The princess told Rania to act boldly and without restraint, and to leave the cleanup work to her. Knowing what to do, Rania began to look around the study. The next moment, she made a discovery that I can really do anything, right? The princess thought she had some reservations and said with a smile, of course. But the next moment, Rania put on her gloves. Then she threw a punch towards the ceiling above the princess. Immediately after, a green mass fell down, brushing past the princess's face. Then, a large green eyeball appeared on the documents. Rania calmly reminded them not to touch it and to leave it to her. After cleaning it up, Rania stood behind the princess, watching her handle the mountain of documents. When she was dissatisfied, the princess mercilessly made them go back and rewrite it. Watching the staff run out in a hurry, Rania felt they were afraid of something. Just then, the princess suddenly spoke. They're afraid of being bitten by a mad dog. Rania's eyes widened in disbelief. The mad dog refers to you, Your Highness? It turned out that, at some point, the nobles had started calling the princess a mad dog. But the princess didn't take it to heart because it had its advantages. For example, getting the nobles to provide aid to the battlefield. They might ignore others' orders, but when faced with a mad dog first princess, they didn't dare to disobey. Just to get even a little more supplies for the soldiers on the front lines, Her Highness was willing to bear this unpleasant reputation. Rania really hadn't expected that the dignified first princess could go to such lengths. Looking at Her Highness working so hard before her, Rania felt as if she was seeing the old sword saint from her past. And it was this very princess so dedicated to her people, who had an ancient magic circuit planted on her body. This was something often used on the battlefield. It summoned magical beasts by absorbing the host's life force. And this pattern had appeared on the bodies of the first princess's 2 younger sisters a week before they died. That was how the princess knew her time was running out. The princess, knowing the truth, was furious. Her sisters had their lives drained away for the sake of mere magical beasts. There were indeed rumors of magical beasts appearing before they died, but they were suppressed by their idiot brother, who also forbade any investigation into the cause of their deaths. Then, rumors spread that the royal family was cursed. Even though Rania knew the princess's life force was constantly draining, she couldn't deal with it immediately, because if she removed the circuit now, the lost life force could not be recovered. Only by dealing with the magical beast the instant it is summoned can the stolen life force be successfully retrieved. Of course, there could be no accidents in this process, or the princess would surely die. After hearing Rania's explanation, the princess silently retorted, "It sounds like you've experienced it firsthand." Hearing this, Rania gave a dry cough, as if trying to hide something. Then she said she was going to start a real job. The princess was curious what she was going to do. That aren't you working right now? Rania just smiled and said she was going out to take care of some trash. Once outside, Rania expressionlessly rolled her shoulders. Looking at the dense magical engravings in the hallway, there's still quite a lot to do. When the surveillance magic was destroyed, the person behind the scenes naturally noticed. But they weren't worried at all. They just thought it was the princess's final struggle before death. Although the princess looked unchanged, her body was constantly being eroded. After all, that was a circuit personally chosen by the first prince. Even a master of the Black Magic Tower, who specialized in this field, couldn't undo it. And what they had to do was to properly record her struggles before death. Then, this human-shaped trash was brought before the princess by Rania. Learning that these were the guys who had placed the surveillance circuits everywhere, the princess, who was getting ready for bed, was very surprised. She let out a long sigh. "You've been busy so late. You've worked hard." But Rania had an excited look on her face and said it wasn't hard work at all, because the feeling of beating people up was just too great. It was the first time Her Highness, the princess, had ever hand-fed someone, and that person actually fainted from excitement. It turned out that just a moment ago, Rania had brought this trash before the princess, and identified them as the ones monitoring the princess's every move. The kind princess gave them a chance to explain themselves, but they all claimed it was to protect the princess. The princess was deeply moved by their way of showing loyalty, so she grabbed the surveillance familiar and rewarded it to their leader. The blonde-haired leader fainted on the spot from excitement. The remaining 2 were also trembling with fear, and the princess watched the men before her as if they were ants. Then she turned to look at Rania. "Next, you can go and wreak as much havoc as you like." At this moment, the princess finally decided to show her fangs. In the past 2 days, news of the court mages being captured spread quickly among the maids. Some of them had unintentionally seen many people being taken to the underground prison at night. Then, shrill screams began to echo endlessly. Thus, the legend of the princess's black-haired, black-eyed maid began to circulate among them. The maid in charge of delivering meals was scared to tears. Pushing the food cart to the princess's door, she had just mustered the courage to tell herself that everything was fine. But in the blink of an eye, a figure was blasted out of the princess's room. The next moment, the princess's black-haired, black-eyed maid actually appeared. The blasted-out Mage still deluded himself into thinking he could see the princess again, but Rania showed him no mercy. With a casual wave of her finger, he was instantly bound, completely losing his ability to move. Witnessing this brutal scene, the maid screamed in terror, successfully attracting Rania's attention. Feeling that she was done for, the maid silently said goodbye to this world in her heart. But all she heard was the sound of a door slamming shut. When she opened her eyes again, the food cart was gone. The scene changes. The food is laid out on the table. As the princess ate, she praised Rania for letting her watch such a good show. Their appearance, wagging their tails and begging for pity, was truly delightful. At this moment, Rania had turned into a foodie, drool uncontrollably dripping from the corner of her mouth. The princess praised Rania for being able to catch all those people in one go so effortlessly. But she didn't know that in Rania's heart, the truly amazing one was the princess. She showed no signs of being a person on the verge of death. You have to know, even knights who had been through countless battles didn't possess such a strong will. The princess hadn't expected Rania to accomplish so much within 3 days. She was curious about who she really was. Rania replied guiltily, for example, an assistant professor at the Magic Academy. Hearing this, the princess smiled slightly. All right, if you say so, then I'll take your word for it. Feeling her life force about to run out, the princess asked a favor of Rania. It was to entrust her younger sister, the fourth princess, to her. Hearing this, Rania's eyes widened in disbelief. Could it be? The princess stood up and said, "It's exactly what you're thinking. Her brother didn't have the talent to be king. He was an idiot who would use any means to achieve his goals. We absolutely cannot let that kind of person sit on the throne." However, Rania was a bit confused. "But there's still you, your highness, the first princess." But the princess shook her head in denial, saying that wasn't her duty to prevent the soldiers on the battlefield from sacrificing themselves in vain. "My mission is to put a king worthy of them on the throne." As soon as she finished speaking, the princess could no longer hold on. She suddenly lost all her strength. The head maid hurriedly supported her. The most dangerous moment had arrived. The princess's life force had been almost completely drained by the magical beast. At this moment, she felt as uncomfortable as if she were seeing her idiot brother. Looking at the princess, who was still in the mood to joke, Rania admired her from the bottom of her heart. She smiled and comforted the princess. "Rest assured and take a break. When you wake up, everything will be fine." Hearing this, the princess closed her eyes in peace. At this moment, her body had been completely eroded by the curse. The ensuing pain was absolutely unbearable for an ordinary person. "Please leave the rest to me, your highness." At this point, Rania confidently raised her right hand. When it came to dealing with curses, she was supposed to be the high and mighty first princess of the kingdom, but she had to become her idiot brother's puppet just to survive. Yet even so, she couldn't escape his vicious hands. Just now, the cursed princess fell into a coma. Death was approaching her. Her 5 senses were fading. At this moment, she felt so powerless. So this was how her 2 younger sisters felt back then. She was unwilling to die just like this. She still had to make her idiot brother face the retribution he deserved. After absorbing all the princess's life force, the magical beast finally took form. It should have been reborn at this moment. However, the next moment, its throat of destiny was seized by someone. It struggled violently, unwilling to give up, but it couldn't escape from Rania's grasp. As the magical beast was caught, the princess weakly woke up. At that moment, she saw the most beautiful light in the world. It was the light of the stars that she had only ever seen on her fourth sister. Rania smiled and crushed the magical beast to death with one hand. Then, the life force it had devoured returned to the princess's body. The princess was reborn. She sincerely expressed her gratitude to Rania. At the same time, she was curious how she had done it. Rania smiled brightly. "I just gave it a try, and it worked. That's all. Looking at the triumphant Rania, the princess and the maid, though they didn't understand, were greatly shocked. The one who should live had survived, and the ones who should leave had all fled. The princess now felt that even the air was so fresh. All those people thought the princess would surely die from the curse. They never would have imagined the princess had such an all-powerful, black-haired, black-eyed maid. However, the promised 3 days were over. Rania was worried about the princess's safety from now on. The princess told her not to worry, because her brother absolutely would not make a move before figuring out her trump card. Of course, more importantly, the most excellent hound would be coming to protect her. Hearing the word hound, the first person Rania thought of was her own former little follower. And the result was just as she had thought. The princess smiled and said it was the silent pursuer, Lord Garrett. The princess had heard he was a reliable man of few words. Rania felt it sounded a bit fantastical. Is she really talking about my little fanboy? The princess wanted to introduce them, but Rania quickly refused. The princess wanted to show her gratitude. That there really nothing you want? After all, she had said before that if Rania saved her, she could have whatever she wanted. However, Rania was very satisfied with her current life and really couldn't think of anything she wanted. The princess sighed helplessly and took a black envelope from her clothes. It was a magical item. Whatever was written on it would be instantly transmitted to the princess. If she ever needed anything, Rania could summon the princess at any time. Her Highness would forever remember Rania's life-saving grace. As they say, a debt of life can never be repaid. How about I? That really is just like you, princess. Rania helplessly accepted the princess's kind offer. Next, the princess led Rania to a stone wall. There was a secret passage here that led outside. As they were about to part, Rania said she had one last question. The princess looked at her in surprise. Rania asked if the princess had ever met the hero, Carl. The princess replied that she had indeed met him. She had met 5 heroes so far, and Carl was the worst of them. A human with no conviction who acted solely on instinct and desire. Thinking of him made the princess as annoyed as when she thought of her brother. It feels like this world is hopeless. Hearing the princess's evaluation, Rania couldn't suppress the corners of her upturned mouth. The princess looked at her, completely puzzled. Rania gave a dry cough to hide her awkwardness. That was close. She almost laughed out loud. Even Carl, who only thinks with his lower body, is seen as a hero who represents hope in the eyes of outsiders. Rania truly hadn't expected that the princess could see through that person's essence with just one glance. Finally, the princess told Rania to be careful on her way. At this moment, she smiled brilliantly. These past few days with you, Assistant Professor Rania, have been truly enjoyable. Rania also laughed happily. Her Highness is truly a strange person. Rania went through the secret passage alone, but suddenly remembered that the practical exams were coming up soon. What am I going to do then? Stepping out of the secret passage, Rania stretched lazily. Oh well, I'll worry about troublesome things later. It was the girl's first time supervising a practical combat test, and she raised the difficulty to hell level, simply because she had arranged for herself to be the final boss. After rescuing the princess, Rania successfully returned to the Magic Academy. But it wasn't long before her master arrived to call her to account. Roselle had learned about his precious disciple's actions over the past few days from the newspaper. He was so angry he almost hit her. Rania looked guilty and argued that the princess would clean up the mess. Seeing that this kid dared to talk back, Roselle had to use his trump card. It seems the genius mage who created her own field of study doesn't listen to her master's words anymore. These words made Rania blush beet red, wishing she could find a hole to crawl into. Who would have thought that a tactic developed just to deal with Scuber would be so highly praised by everyone? Roselle wanted to continue lecturing his flighty disciple, but was interrupted by a knock on the door. The visitor was Professor Marquardt, who was in charge of the students' practical combat project. Rania was wondering why he was here, but when she turned her head, she saw her master's "What trouble are you up to now?" kid look. Rania just wanted to shout that she had been wronged. It turned out that Rania had run into Professor Marquardt earlier. Using his injury from the last magical beast rampage as an excuse, he had asked Rania to help prepare for the upcoming practical combat test. He was here now to deliver the relevant materials. At first, Rania had just planned to go through the motions. But when she saw that the theme this time was a survival challenge, requiring a simulated battlefield for the test, she was instantly interested. Since they want the students to experience the feeling of a battlefield, then I'll just have to recreate the battlefield environment a bit more accurately. Thinking this, Rania quickly began to formulate a plan, letting out an excited ha-ha-ha laugh as she wrote. She looked at her plan with a wicked smile that doesn't seem to be a problem. On the other side, Lack and Belle were practicing sparring. The two were once evenly matched, but now Lack could feel an overwhelming gap between him and Belle. He really couldn't understand why. In the end, Lack lost the match as expected. Although he was already prepared for defeat, he couldn't find any feeling from this loss. He sat on the ground dejectedly, alone, until Princess Aira came to find him. She sat down next to Lack. Are you shocked by this result? The two of you were once neck and neck, but now you've been left behind by him. Lack wasn't bitter about the loss, because accepting defeat is also a necessary quality for a warrior. But the little princess had a slightly different view. Because being able to accept defeat doesn't mean you don't strive for victory. There are so many good teachers in the academy. Why not ask them for guidance? Besides, isn't there someone who is perfectly suitable? Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was the day of the practical combat test. The students gathered in a magical beast forest. Rania first clapped her hands to signal for everyone to be quiet. Then she began to introduce the content of this survival exam. There were two objectives for this test. Completing either one would be sufficient. Either defeat the final boss or survive in the forest for 3 days. Before the exam began, Rania distributed special bracelets to each student. It could be used to record the student's performance. The more injured they were, the lower their score. If it dropped to a certain level, they would be teleported out of the exam area. The students listened, each one looking like they had lost the will to live, as expected of Assistant Professor Rania. As Rania distributed the bracelets, she reminded the students to be ready to adapt to any situation. Once everyone had put on their bracelets, the exam officially began. And with a snap of Rania's fingers, the forest that had just been lush and green instantly became filled with a deathly aura. The students looked around in fear. Carelessly, someone was attacked by a magical beast. Seeing their companion's miserable state, screams began to ring out endlessly. Is this really an appropriate difficulty for an exam? In just a short while, many people had been eliminated. If this were a real battle, the corpses would probably be piled up like mountains. Seeing the students' miserable state, Rania sighed helplessly. It seems they still have a long way to go. Suddenly, Rania received a magical message. It was from Professor Marquardt, who had asked for her help. Even he, who had always advocated for practical combat with magical beasts, broke out in a cold sweat after seeing Rania's arrangements. So he had to voice his doubts. Isn't this difficulty a bit too high? For the usually hot-tempered Professor Marquardt to say something like this, it was clear the difficulty was truly extraordinary. But Rania didn't think there was a problem at all. Most of the students here are going to the battlefield. Rather than dying on the battlefield, then, isn't it better to experience the cruelty of the battlefield in advance now? It's precisely so they can survive as long as possible in the future that this must be done. Besides, getting injured is just a deduction of points, not a failure. Professor Marquardt ultimately approved of Rania's idea, but there was one point he couldn't agree with. Why did you personally enter the field? How could the students possibly defeat you? However, Rania just grinned. What to do when facing an unbeatable enemy is exactly what they need to learn. The girl never would have thought that her diligent efforts to teach as a teacher would end up becoming a lingering nightmare in her students' minds. At the beginning of the practical combat assessment, students were eliminated one after another. But this didn't make them want to retreat. Instead, one by one, their fighting spirit was ignited, even if what awaited them was failure once again. The original person in charge, Professor Marquardt, watched the students' performance through a crystal ball, seeing that they were not knocked down by the setbacks, and got back up again and again, then formulated new battle plans. He was very satisfied. They all achieved growth by leaps and bounds in this assessment. There was just one thing. This final boss was really a bit too difficult. On the other side, student Belle reached the final destination, only to see a smiling assistant Professor Rania. At this moment, Belle was speechless. The final boss couldn't be. Across from him, Rania was full of excitement. That's right. It's me. After getting a definite answer, Belle immediately lost the will to live. How can we possibly win against someone who can fight the Hound in close combat? That's a given. But Rania wasn't going to leave the challengers with no chance at all. She lightly snapped her fingers. Then there was a loud bang, and a deep crack appeared at Belle's feet. If she had aimed at Belle just now, he would have been done for by now. Now that the other students have all grown, it would be a shame if the person who made it to the end learned nothing. So, to create an opportunity for you, Rania placed several restrictions on herself. First, as long as you don't cross that line, I won't attack first. Second, when I cast spells, I won't specify a target. Besides these, there are 3 more, which the challengers will have to discover for themselves. As long as you physically touch the tree stump behind me, you win. Of course, that might sound simple, but doing it is another matter entirely. But Belle wasn't one to give up easily. He conjured 2 ice blades in his hands and took a fighting stance. Then he stomped on the ground and charged towards Rania. However, Rania casually blocked his attack. The next moment, a loud bang erupted between the two, and Belle was sent flying backward. Rania's figure slowly emerged from the dust and smoke. Then, Rania instantly appeared in front of Belle and flicked him on the forehead. Not far from them, behind a rock, Lack watched this one-sided beating with a cold sweat. Although he had a bad feeling from the start, he never expected the final boss to be this person. Lack took the opportunity while she wasn't looking and charged forward, but it was completely useless. He was almost taken out with a single punch. Lack, who struggled to block the blow, sent a party invitation to Belle behind him. He needed an agile comrade right now, and Lack happened to need a solid meat shield. The two hit it off immediately, for no other reason than to defeat the nightmare of Ophelia before them. A weapon is a warrior's life and death partner. Therefore, when it's time to throw it, you must throw it decisively. In order to defeat Assistant Professor Rania, Lack and Belle had to team up, but Rania was completely unconcerned. According to Lack's secret observation, Assistant Professor Rania only fights with her left hand. Hearing this piece of intelligence, Belle remarked on how accurate Lack's intuition was. Then, the next step was to continue probing. As a warrior, Lack acted first. He slashed fiercely at Rania, but Rania easily dodged it. Immediately after, he was kneed in the stomach. Lack, taking a heavy blow, spat out a mouthful of stomach acid on the spot. As a teacher, Rania didn't show any favoritism. The next second, she instantly appeared beside Belle and landed a heavy punch on his chest. Belle, also taking a heavy blow, spat out a mouthful of stomach acid. Professor Markhart watched this battle through the crystal ball. He felt that Assistant Professor Rania was going a bit too far. At this point, Belle barely managed to get up, while Lack couldn't stand up at all. Having no choice, Belle dragged Lack toward the rear. They had to reconsider their strategy. Looking at the two who were still full of fighting spirit, Rania couldn't help but recall the hero Carl. Just thinking about him made her blood boil. Compared to him, she felt Lack was countless times better. At least so far, their performance has been pretty good. So what will you do next? At this moment, the two were resting against a large tree. Belle asked Lack if he could still enter that red-eyed state. Lack said it was no problem, but he would lose his sanity. Belle said that was fine, and he would coordinate with his actions. Next, Belle wanted to borrow Lack's weapon, but was sternly refused by L.A.K.M. Why weapon is my crucial partner. Hearing this, Belle was speechless. Who was it that threw their partner without hesitation? In the end, Lack reluctantly handed the axe over. At this time, Rania was waiting for them with a smile. Letting you pass the test easily would defeat the purpose. She felt that she must be a good teacher who thinks for her students' sake. This must be what Master wanted, right? At the same time, the two who were still discussing tactics couldn't help but shudder, feeling as if someone was plotting against them. Belle quickly returned the axe to Lack. He had finished enchanting it. They had now found 4 of the restrictions, in addition to the 2 Rania had explained at the beginning. He also only casts spells with his left hand, no more than 3 at a time. And after each cast, he has a specific gesture. After organizing the clues, the two decided to cause a ruckus again. This time, Lack went straight into his berserk state from the start. Across from them, Rania watched this scene in surprise. This was the unique body enhancement magic of the Northern Warriors. But because it causes the user to lose their sanity, Rania, who enjoys close combat, didn't like it at all. She was curious how he planned to attack. Then, Lack raised his twin axes high and swung them down. Rania instantly dodged. Lack's subsequent attacks seemed chaotic, but in reality, they were relentlessly pressing her. He should be acting purely on instinct right now. But after a moment's thought, Rania figured it out. It turned out Belle was controlling Lack's movements through a shadow. Their performance earned Rania's approval, but it was still lacking. especially Lack in this state. He's a magic user, too, to be controlled by his own side spell. It was simply too embarrassing. As Rania threw a punch, the immense power made Lack spit out a mouthful of blood on the spot. This blow should have been enough to knock him unconscious. But under Belle's control, Lack continued his fierce assault. At the same time, Belle conjured a dagger and stealthily attacked Rania from behind. However, Rania easily saw through it, catching the blade between just 2 fingers. Rania smiled, shattered the dagger with her grip, and encouraged him to keep trying. This momentum is good. They need this kind of calm judgment. A new day arrived. The other students were still struggling to devise strategies. Meanwhile, Lack and Belle were carried back. Although they looked utterly miserable, they had ultimately passed. However, their wretched state still shocked their classmates. To be injured this badly, the magical beasts in this forest must be incredibly powerful. And as the final boss, Rania was very satisfied with the results of this training. The practical combat test was over. Lack recovered under the doctor's meticulous care. At this time, a doubt appeared in his mind. After going berserk, he should only act on instinct. But on that day, he had somehow maintained his sanity. He didn't know why, but someone definitely did. So, Lack went to Assistant Professor Rania's office to seek help. Looking at the fully recovered Lack, the culprit, Rania, had a look of gratification. Rania wondered what he was here for, but at the critical moment, Lack stammered, unable to speak. His heart was pounding and his mind went blank. Rania stared at him curiously and suddenly guessed the truth. A smile spread across her face as she figured it out. You want to ask how to maintain your sanity in the berserk state, don't you? Lack, standing to the side, trembled in fear at the assistant professor's expression. Whatever it is, it's best to experience it for yourself. Saying this, Rania took a black envelope from her drawer. Then she began humming a little tune happily while writing something on it. Lack was curious about what Rania was writing. Rania said it was for someone she had recently met. She should be more than happy to help. Sure enough, just after she finished writing, Rania received a reply. Lack waited on the side, breaking out in a cold sweat, having a bad feeling. After reading the letter, Rania looked delighted. Well then, student Lack, are you interested in some hands-on learning? He was supposed to be a super genius, but he was unknowingly being crushed by his classmates. Unwilling to accept this, he decided to seek help from Assistant Professor Rania. As a teacher, Rania naturally couldn't ignore a student's request. With a wicked grin, she requested a letter of recommendation from Her Highness, the First Princess. What better way to learn than through actual combat? With the letter of recommendation in hand, Lack went alone to the recruit training camp. The drill instructor heard a report from his subordinate, the knight in training Demac. Young Master Lack from the north has arrived. He thought it was just another noble's son coming to get some credentials. He had no desire to deal with such people. But seeing the seal of Her Highness, the First Princess, on the recommendation letter, he didn't dare ignore it. He casually tossed the letter aside and sighed in resignation. This is a place for training knights who are about to step onto the battlefield. Who has time to play house with these noble brats? That being said, an order from the princess couldn't be refused. So the instructor told Demac to just deal with him for a few days. Demac, covered in a cold sweat, approached Lack, who had been waiting for a long time, and took him on a tour to familiarize him with camp. He watched the soldiers on the training ground endlessly repeating their drills. Meanwhile, Princess Era was sitting shyly in Rania's office. Because Rania was showing her many letters, all of them filled with the first princess's concerns for her younger sister. Princess Era was both happy and a little embarrassed as she read them. But Rania had a clever look on her face. The first princess never said the contents couldn't be shown to others. It should be fine, right? Suddenly, Princess Era noticed a mention of a letter of recommendation. Rania happily explained that it was a discussion about practical combat training. Era guessed it immediately. Is the subject of the training, young Master Lack? Then, the next time we meet, perhaps he'll be the top student of the combat magic department. The scene changes. Lack has already begun his daily training. No matter how hard or tiring it was, he didn't complain in the slightest. His serious attitude quickly won the instructor's approval. He hadn't expected him to actually keep up with the training pace. It seemed he wasn't here just to play around. But the instructor soon shook his head again. Effort alone isn't enough, because on the battlefield, even a moment of carelessness can lead to death. Just then, the knight in training Demac suddenly came to ask for instructions. Should Lack also participate in the night patrol? In response, the instructor asked for Demac's opinion. Demac reported that Lack had requested to join on his own initiative, and he believed Lack was qualified. Not only that, but he also often trained alone late into the night. Hearing this, the instructor approved Lack's request. DMAC bowed in thanks. The instructor looked at Lack in the distance. He felt that although this guy didn't seem very bright, he was exceptionally serious. Well then, let's observe him a little more. After a hard day of training, a hearty dinner awaited them. DMAC asked Lack, who was beside him, if the food was to his liking. Lack replied that it tasted similar to the orcs he ate as a child. DMAC was instantly floored. After finishing their meal, the two began to patrol the area. DMAC was curious why he was trying so hard, when other noble sons just came to fool around for a bit before leaving. But at that moment, Lack glanced around. His beast-like intuition was sounding an alarm. He tightened his grip on his weapon as he replied, "Because I have an opponent I must defeat." Hearing this, DMAC was about to ask more when he was pulled back by the collar. Sitting on the ground, a surprised DMAC asked, "What's wrong?" Before Lack could answer, countless red lights appeared in the woods, accompanied by roars. Lack told him to hurry back and inform the instructor, while he stayed behind to hold them off. Without any hesitation, DMAC turned and left. Considering the distance from the camp, it would take at least 10 minutes for reinforcements to arrive. Lack didn't know if he could last that long, but then he suddenly came to his senses. According to Assistant Professor Rania's teachings, what he should be thinking about now was not how long he could last, but how to defeat them in a short amount of time. She was once an introverted and timid girl. Despite possessing unparalleled talent, she had always lived under the disdainful gazes of the elders, only because there was an insurmountable mountain in front of her, until she met a life mentor at the academy. Now, she has transformed and begun to show her true prowess. Just a moment ago, Elder Gylian, the most powerful figure in the Gray Magic Tower, that heard from a subordinate magic user that Lester was waiting for him in the Tower Master's office. The girl who used to be scared to death of him was now actively requesting a meeting. He was very curious what that coward was up to. At this moment, Lester was standing by the window of the Tower Master's office, looking outside. Only when the sound of the door opening was heard did she coldly turn around. "That you're slower than I expected, Elder Gylian." Lester, dressed in a magnificent magic robe, turned to face him. Elder Gylian looked impatient. "What do you want calling me this late?" Faced with the question, Lester didn't answer. She just casually flicked her finger. The next moment, the office door slammed shut with a bang. Elder Gylian's eyes widened in disbelief. Because at this moment, the entire Tower Master's office, every single object, was entwined with Lester's mana. This was a declaration of territory. Was the person before him really the coward he knew? At this moment, Lester showed no trace of weakness. She stood coldly by the desk. "Don't you think there are too many right now?" Having never seen her like this, Elder Gylian broke into a cold sweat. "What on earth are you talking about?" He never expected to get the number of elders as an answer. Lester spoke with a calm expression that, "I believe we only need to keep half of the current elders." Meanwhile, on his first patrol, Lack encountered a massive attack from undead monsters. Although they were numerous, a warrior's honor did not allow him to retreat in the slightest. This time, Lack entered his berserk state right from the start. Then, without hesitation, he charged forward. Normally, someone entering this state would lose all reason. But during the last practical combat test, he had remained lucid with Assistant Professor Rania's help. And to grasp that feeling again, actual combat was the best way to learn. For this, Rania had provided Lack with a stage. Now was the perfect chance for Lack to let loose. Although the battle had just begun, he had already successfully found the feeling. At this moment, he felt his whole body brimming with energy. He didn't even care about being bitten by the undead creatures. As he grew more accustomed to the feeling, the aura emanating from him grew stronger. In this moment, his vision widened, his movements became agile. A casual swing of his axe dealt critical damage. Next, he transformed into an invincible berserker. The hunt began. On the other side, DMAC led the instructor, rushing over quickly. Sensing the increasingly dense demonic aura around them, along with the putrid smell mixed with blood, the instructor wondered what on earth had happened up ahead. And when they arrived at the source of the incident, they all stared with wide, shocked eyes. There stood Lack, covered in blood, standing proudly in place. The surroundings were littered with countless severed limbs. This was a task that should have required an entire squad of knights to complete. Unexpectedly, it was resolved by a new recruit who had been training for less than 3 days. Now back to his normal state, Lack was exhausted and panting heavily. Hearing the noise, he turned to see that the instructor and the others had arrived. He instantly relaxed. DMAC quickly rushed forward to check if he was injured, but Lack said he was completely fine, because his 2 axes had been inscribed with a protection circuit without his knowledge. And the person who could do this was undoubtedly Assistant Professor Rania. Realizing this, the corners of Lack's mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. He emotionally hugged his little companions. This baffling behavior left D-Mac across from him completely bewildered. Has this guy lost his mind? At this moment, the instructor, moved by Lack's feat, bowed deeply. It's a relief you're all right. I never thought Lack could handle so many enemies alone. However, this disrupts the original combat training plan. So, the instructor asked Lack to conduct combat training with these knights in training, stating that with young Master Lack's skill, he was more than capable of the task. Having earned his recognition, Lack didn't refuse. Then, can I train with you, instructor? Of course. The girl's simple smile was enough to make the ever-arrogant elder break out in a cold sweat, because she held something in her hands that was enough to flip the table. Time rewinds to when Rania was disguised as the first princess's personal maid. At this time, Lester arrived alone at the Gray Magic Tower. The magic users around were all shocked to see the girl suddenly appear here, because before, she never actively appeared here. The old Lester felt that she didn't belong here, and no one here truly treated her as the next Tower Master. But now, she had changed her mind. This place was supposed to be hers to rule. At this moment, Lester took out a key. It was a reward from Assistant Professor Rania for getting first place in the exam. It could be used to open one of Renyel's drawers. Arriving at the storage room, she found the corresponding cabinet based on the mark on the key. Lester happily opened it. Inside, a square object sat quietly. With a puzzled expression, Lester carefully picked it up. Is this a magic tool? But how do I use it? The little spirit Cheryl tried with all her might, but to no avail. She couldn't help but wonder if the thing was broken. But looking at the object in her hand, Lester thought the possibility of it being broken was extremely small. Although it looked like an ordinary 6-sided artifact, it was actually a magic tool of Lady Renyel. It definitely wouldn't break so easily. There must be some secret to it. As Lester focused her attention and observed it, the so-called secret was finally discovered. The next moment, the tool in her hand split in two, and countless confidential documents flew out from within. Seeing this, the little spirit pressed against Lester's cheek in admiration. As expected of my master. How did you do it? There was a deliberately distorted magic inscription on it. All I had to do was restore it. Looking at the documents in her hand, Lester finally understood what Assistant Professor Rania meant by if you get angry, just flip the table. Because the information recorded here could shake the elders and grand elders of the Gray Magic Tower to their core. If it were leaked, it wouldn't be impossible for it to topple the entire Magic Tower. Lester took a deep breath to calm herself down. Right now, she had no supporters. So, the best method she could take was to pull that person to her side. Time returns to the present. Suddenly hearing the usually timid Lester propose to abolish half the elders. Elder Jillian questioned her motives. However, Lester didn't answer. She just calmly pushed a document in front of him. Elder Jillian picked it up, and with just one glance, his face turned pale with fright. He asked in disbelief, "Where on earth did you get this?" But at this moment, Lester's expression was grim. Now, it's my turn to ask the questions. Feeling the pressure emanating from the girl across from him, he wondered, is this really the Lester I know? Lester stated that she didn't intend to get personally involved in these matters. She would only find an opportunity to create a small crack, and then she would need someone to widen it at the right time. After speaking, Lester extended her hand with a menacingly kind smile. "You will help me, won't you, Elder Jillian?" At this moment, Elder Jillian's previous impression of Lester was completely overturned. All those evaluations of her being timid, cowardly, and indecisive, that seemed like a complete joke. The her of now already possessed sufficient ability, just like that person. But Elder Jillian still found it hard to believe. Can a person really change this much? Or perhaps this is her true nature, and everyone had been wrong from the very beginning. The girl before him was, in this moment, vowing to become the master of the Gray Magic Tower. She was ready to bear this heavy responsibility. Having figured this out, Elder Jillian sighed helplessly. "It seems I have no choice at all." However, Lester kindly reminded him, "Actually, you do have a choice. For example, you could eliminate me right here." Hearing this, Elder Jillian burst out laughing. How surprising. "Then, please tell me the detailed plan, my future master of the Gray Magic Tower." At this moment, Elder Jillian finally gave Lester his true recognition, and Lester revealed a gratified smile. Lester happily exclaimed what a reliable partner he was. Elder Gillian replied that he would cooperate with all his might. After all, the Magic Tower was a very important place to him too. It was another sunny day. Lester was getting ready to go to school. At this moment, Cheryl had a happy look on her face, simply because her master loved studying at school. That's right, Lester was greatly looking forward to her teacher's lesson today. However, unlike Lester's anticipation, the other students looked utterly dejected, simply because the topic for today was announced as basic mana transmutation. Of course, that wasn't the important part. The important part was that the teacher in charge was Assistant Professor Rania. The large group of underachievers couldn't help but let out miserable howls. The end of the holidays is terrifying. One moment, the girl had a blissful expression. The next moment, she was taken away by human traffickers. Just a moment ago, Belle was sitting alone on a bench, dazed. But he was startled by a girl who suddenly appeared behind him. The newcomer was none other than the white moonlight of Belle's heart, Chloe. In the past, Belle was just a pitiful little beggar. Until one day, he met a little girl. The little girl first introduced herself, then eagerly asked for his name. However, a child abandoned since birth wouldn't have a name. He angrily retorted, "What's the use of something like that?" Hearing this, Chloe muttered, "Weird." Then, she excitedly wrapped her own scarf around his neck. Seeing the strange expression on his face, Chloe was very happy. Then, Chloe extended her hand to him. "Come with me." From then on, their two hands were tightly clasped together. Chloe gave the little boy the name Belnoa, a name that meant abandoned child. This girl brought light to that name. And from then on, Belle found his reason for living, to protect that light in his heart. But now, as a groggy Belle slowly opened his eyes, he only remembered that he had lost that light. It wasn't long ago that they were walking hand in hand, shopping. Then they went to Chloe's favorite dessert shop to enjoy some sweets. After they finished eating, the two went for a relaxing walk in a small grove. The wonderful atmosphere made Belle lower his guard, completely failing to notice that someone was watching them with malicious intent. And then, Belle could no longer find any trace of Chloe, and he himself was being led by undead monsters through a filthy sewer. I have to find her. For that, Belle would pay any price. It was this strong conviction that allowed Belle to summon the scales for the first time. At this moment, the scales formally acknowledged Belle and asked him for his wish. For a moment, Belle was silent. He never thought it would be at a time like this. But he quickly came to his senses. Right now, there was something more important than his own life. So he quickly spoke out a deal. Meanwhile, Rania was worrying at her master's house. She asked her master if it was really necessary to assign group tasks to the students. However, she received a question in return from her master, "Aren't you the one who knows best about this sort of thing?" Hearing this, a speechless Rania pointed to herself, "Dummy, but I've never attended classes at a school." But Roselle said that her experiences on the battlefield also counted as a kind of group task. Hearing the word battlefield brought back bad memories for Rania. She had indeed learned a few things. For example, the law of conservation of scum. In any group of people, there are always a few scumbags, like the hero who only thinks with his lower body, the narcissistic saintess, and the racist elf. Hearing this, Roselle sighed helplessly that it's been tough on you these past few years. But that's life. Whether you like it or not, you always have to deal with other people. You can always learn something from these experiences. At the very least, your patience has greatly improved. In the end, Roselle told his precious disciple not to overthink it and to reflect more on the meaning of teamwork. After hearing this, Rania fell into deep thought. Just as she didn't want to team up with useless people, there are some things that one person cannot do alone. In that case, I'll design a task that's impossible to complete alone. Rania looked at the plan in her hand, feeling very pleased with herself. She just wondered how the students would feel about it. After finishing the plan, Rania went to the Gray Magic Tower. She was there to purchase 20 whole anti-magic stones. The master of the Black Magic Tower looked at her, breaking out in a cold sweat. What is she planning to do? One must know that anti-magic stones are extremely rare. They can repel mana and are usually used to create barriers. More importantly, they are very expensive. And not long ago, she also bought some special paper, which wasn't cheap at all. The master of the Black Magic Tower asked with some concern, "Do you need this many for testing?" But he heard Rania reply matter-of-factly that she was just buying them for class. Hearing this, the master of the Black Magic Tower's eyes widened in disbelief, shocked by her extravagance. When Rania was about to leave, he didn't forget to carry a large bag of gold coins, smiling broadly and welcoming the boss to visit again. Having gotten what she wanted, Rania was also delighted. Now, I just need to modify the plan a little. Could it be that I'm a genius at teaching? She is clearly one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race, yet she disregarded her status to kidnap an ordinary student, all just to use him as bait to lure out his teacher. As the holidays came to an end, the students resumed their classes. Rania was down below, earnestly explaining what she considered to be basic knowledge, occasionally asking 1 or 2 simple questions. And in this class, Lack's performance was outstanding. The usually simple-minded him was actually able to answer questions correctly. Of course, once the questions got more in-depth, Lack's mind would go blank. But despite this, Rania was still very satisfied with his progress. As for these slightly more complex questions, they were nothing for the top student, Lester. In this way, Rania explained the basic incantations in depth and demonstrated the importance of fundamentals to the students through practical action. She casually cast a basic spell and destroyed a hard anti-magic stone. The students watched in astonishment, feeling like their eyes had been opened. However, when Rania clapped her hands, signaling for everyone to get some hands-on experience, and announced that this was the research project for their study groups, that the students were so scared they lost all color in their faces. In that moment, they once again recalled the fear of being dominated. Rania demanded that all students must participate. If anyone slacked off, the entire group score would be deducted. After speaking, Rania distributed the giant magic stones to all the groups. After class, Rania went to a small grove by herself. Then, her little follower, Garrett, appeared before her in a flash. Looking at Garrett, who hadn't even changed his clothes, Rania teased, "Aren't you a bit too busy as the first princess's guard?" Hearing this, Garrett was stunned. "How did you know?" Having let it slip, Rania tried to cover it up, I guess, because you were so late. However, Garrett let out a long sigh. "It's not because of my guard duties, but another problem. Because recently, an unidentified NPC caused a disturbance in the royal palace and then disappeared. And that person seems to be one of the first princess's subordinates, although there's no evidence. So he's been swamped because of this matter." Hearing this, Rania guiltily looked away. Garrett wondered what was wrong with her. Little did he know, she was the legendary black-haired, black-eyed NPC of Her Highness, the first princess. Since he was busy, Rania told him to go take care of his own business first. But then she heard Garrett say he had something else to ask for her help with. Hearing this, Rania instantly felt like she'd been tricked. She was the one who had asked for his help, but in the end, it turned into him asking for her help. At this moment, Rania just wanted to beat him up to vent her frustration. However, her hand was blocked by him. Garrett chuckled dryly and said, "If I get hurt, who's going to help you find Belle?" Hearing this, Rania did indeed calm down, you're right. It turned out that after Rania had assigned the after-class research project, the members of Belle's group had come to find her, because Belle had been missing for several days. He couldn't be found at school or in the dorms, and he wasn't the kind of reckless kid. If something happened to him, the top student, it must be something major. Meanwhile, in the depths of the sewer, the missing Belle lay quietly on a stone slab. Beside him, a pair of beautiful legs paced back and forth out of boredom. Will that person really come? And this person was the apostate, Grace, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race. She was looking forward to her reunion with Rania. So, someone not chosen by the Holy Sword can also become a hero. And this person also happened to be the white moonlight in someone's heart. Just a moment ago, relying on Garrett's keen sense of smell, the two of them were rushing in the direction where Belle disappeared. At this moment, Garrett suddenly asked Rania if she had heard about the new hero. Rania replied that she had indeed heard of them, but had never met them. Hearing this, Garrett found it a bit incredible. He thought the new hero would have paid a visit to his senior, Rania. Rania disagreed with this. After all, she was just a magic user who was decent at hand-to-hand combat and knew nothing about swordsmanship. However, Garrett thought that this time's hero was a bit special. But Rania didn't believe it at all, because the heroes of this world have become a kind of consumable. Every so often, a hero dies, and at the same time, a new hero is born. This process usually repeats itself within 2 years. And it is precisely because of this that Carl has become synonymous with the hero. Although his personality is average, he has held this position for 5 years. Despite this, Rania still complained that the quality of recent heroes was too poor. But this time's hero was a bit special, because she is the disciple of the master of the Black Magic Tower. She is neither a swordsman nor does she have a symbolic weapon, but her entire body is shrouded in starlight. She holds the title of the Starstream hero. And this person is none other than Belle's girlfriend, Chloe. At this, Rania felt a little shocked. If the hero is a magic user, then the other magic towers should be trying every means to win her over. After all, the master of the Black Magic Tower already has one genius disciple. However, just as Rania finished speaking, she heard Garrett say, "I heard the two of them have a very good relationship." At this point, Rania had a bit of headache. She hadn't expected the new hero's spiritual power to be Starlight itself. As a swordsman, Garrett couldn't understand this at all. So what? Rania looked at him speechlessly. It's difficult for ordinary magic users to even establish a pact with the stars. But with Starlight, it can be done with ease. Once such a magic user appears, she will become the center of everyone's attention. And this was also the reason Garrett came to Rania for help, because Chloe and Belle disappeared together. At the same time they vanished, many magical beasts appeared in the Imperial capital. This was already beyond Garrett's capabilities. Rania let out a sigh of relief. As long as we can find a clue, it'll be fine. Next, Rania told Garrett to wipe his nosebleed and go back first. And she had to fulfill her duties as a teacher and bring her beloved student back safely. Meanwhile, the hero Carl was fighting a bloody battle on the front lines. Although he didn't want to take the lead at first, the monsters swarming the mountains and fields left him no room for hesitation. Seeing Carl get injured, the Saintess hurriedly went forward to heal him. Although the injury wasn't too serious, it was quickly healed by the light of healing. But the Saintess still shed tears of regret. It wouldn't have come to this if that man were still here. However, the hero just patted the Saintess on the shoulder, interrupting her, because the monsters were charging forward once again. The hero said he was fine and told the Saintess to hurry back to their position. And he once again gripped the holy sword in his hand. At this moment, Carl was a bit confused. The monsters clearly had the power to destroy humanity. Why didn't they wipe them out? What were they fighting for? Meanwhile, the succubus queen was walking boredly through the sewers, accompanied by a black knight in full black armor. And the missing Belle and Chloe were right beside them. The succubus queen was bickering with the Black Knight for fun. Unexpectedly, an attack came from behind the next moment. The startled Black Knight caught the attack with his bare hand. The succubus queen was so excited she transformed on the spot. This alluring scent was simply intoxicating to her. As they spoke, the two turned to look behind them. They saw the human boy, who should have been unconscious, actually standing up. How unexpected. This succubus queen's taste is a bit strange. How is a dignified man like Rania cute at all? Just a moment ago, Belle stopped the succubus queen and the Black Knight. The succubus queen kindly advised Belle to give up his little friend. In return, she could play with him. However, Belle just coldly told him to hand over Chloe. Hearing this, the queen said, "If you like this type, I can play along." In response, he only got Belle's angry shout, "Shut your filthy mouth." Meanwhile, the Black Knight beside her quietly reminded the succubus queen, "This boy is to be offered to the calamity." The queen pouted helplessly and said she knew. Then she snapped her fingers. "Wake up, part-timers. It's time to work." After summoning a group of undead, the two turned to leave. However, Belle couldn't let them go so easily. He shouted, "Give Chloe back to me," and then shot several shadow beams at the two. The Black Knight just glanced back disdainfully. With a loud roar, all the beams hit the Black Knight. However, when the smoke and dust cleared, the Black Knight appeared completely unscathed. "I advise you not to put up a pointless resistance." After saying that, he ordered the skeletons to attack. Belle had sworn to protect that one-of-a-kind existence, no matter what. How could a few mere skeletons stop his advance now? Smelling the alluring aura emanating from the person before him, the succubus queen wanted to go herself, but the Black Knight objected. The rejected queen pouted angrily. This time, they were ordered to take away the child chosen by the calamity. To spread more chaos, they had to go elsewhere to create a diversion later. Finally, with the hostage secured, the mission would be a success. That was the original plan. Unexpectedly, a small accident occurred. The succubus queen yawned out of boredom and told the Black Knight to finish him off quickly. The Black Knight angrily replied that capturing him alive wasn't that simple. At this point, Belle's mana was depleted, and he had nothing left to trade with the stars. The most important thing now was to shatter the armor before him. So, Bel gathered his remaining mana and turned it into a shadow drill. Then, with a powerful spinning force, he went straight for the Black Knight's head. In the end, the Black Knight's faceplate shattered. Seeing this, the Black Knight expressed his admiration. "Well done, boy." And as a gift in return, he punched Bel hard in the face. Taking the heavy blow, Bel spat out blood and was sent flying. Seeing this, the succubus queen was shocked. "Are you an idiot? What if you killed him?" But the Black Knight said he had held back. Just then, a voice came from behind them. "Held back? You injure my dear student this badly. And you have the nerve to say you held back?" Hearing this familiar tone, the succubus queen, who had been acting like a fool just a moment ago, instantly revealed a smile that only a true master could possess. At this moment, Rania walked over. "Long time no see, apostate Gretus." The succubus queen's aura had completely changed. She looked at Rania with a joyful expression. "My dearest Gray, why you still like to tease me like you used to? I like you so much." Rania didn't want to hear this nonsense. She worriedly went to Bel's side. Bel looked confusedly at the suddenly appeared assistant Professor Rania. Seeing that he could still get up, Rania was relieved. "Don't move, just watch from here." After speaking, she cast a protective spell on Bel. Meanwhile, Gretus, who was possessing the succubus queen, looked at the gender-swapped Rania before her and couldn't help but sigh that the Lich King Skubal really knew how to have fun. "You look so adorable right now." Hearing this, Rania said angrily, "Are you out of your mind? How is this appearance cute at all?" She was a witch, yet she had fallen for a human. For this, she didn't care even if she was crushed to pieces. Just now, Gretus, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon clan, that once again met the lovely gray mage. But she didn't understand why the other person seemed so angry. She clearly liked Gray the most. Wasn't this common knowledge? Hearing this, Rania felt offended. "If that's true, I don't recall you holding back on the battlefield." However, facing Rania's angry expression, Gretus only found it exceptionally cute. Looking at the other's infatuated face, Rania was speechless. She always felt she couldn't handle this person. In the past 5 years on the battlefield, she had met all sorts of people, but this one was completely inscrutable. The Black Dragon Belial, for example, was just a beast acting on instinct, and the first one their squad successfully subjugated. The ancient Lich Skubal was a coward who never appeared easily, but as long as you set a bait, you could catch the big fish. The Sword of Death, Ganalt, was a swordsman with his own honor. He would never pursue those who dropped their weapons and fled. These calamities all had clear characteristics. Only Gretus was completely unpredictable. For some reason, this person had a strong affection for Rania, whether in a male or female body. Faced with Rania's question about the battlefield, Gretus asked in confusion, "Weren't you the one always causing trouble for me?" She had a point. For a moment, Rania was speechless. Then, Gretus apologized to Rania that "I'm sorry, but I can't give you that child. You should just go back obediently." Hearing this, Rania flew into a rage. "You show up here without warning, wreak havoc, and you have the nerve to say that?" But Gretus looked happy. "Wreak havoc? Are you talking about Katanak? You're exaggerating. How is that wreaking havoc?" At this moment, Gretus's smile vanished. "You should know what I'm like when I'm serious, right? Weren't you glad for it too?" Gretus wanted that child because she was very similar to her former self. And it would be difficult for Rania alone to stop her now, because even with the hero and the other two, they might not be her match. But Rania didn't care about that. She threw an enhanced punch fiercely at her opponent. After all, she couldn't get those shameless guys to move, so she had no choice. Just then, the opponent's body suddenly collapsed. The Black Knight quickly supported her. It turned out Gretus had left the succubus queen's body. At this moment, she burst out laughing. "Are you serious? Don't mistake courage for recklessness. If you can, then come and stop me. Of course, that's if you really can." Hearing the roars of beasts from all around, Rania had a bad feeling. Could that sound be? Sure enough, the next moment, a small black dragon charged at Rania. Rania quickly dodged. Gretus, happily riding on the black dragon's head, spoke up, "Let's go play outside together. It's so cramped here. We can only let loose outside, right?" That sounded nice, but Rania knew that her opponent couldn't use much of her power here. For some unknown reason, calamities would enter a weakened state upon entering the capital, as if they were cursed. But even so, in her current state, Rania couldn't defeat her opponent, because calamities were just that powerful. In the blink of an eye, Gretus had already arrived in a deep forest outside the city. Rania followed closely behind. Looking at her figure, Gretus recalled some fond memories. Back then, she was still a saintess, and her favorite was gray. So she thanked Rania. Rania then asked, if that's the case, can you go back? Hearing this, Gretus laughed. You really love to joke. But although she couldn't give that child to Rania, Gretus had prepared a special surprise for her. Rania didn't want any random junk and refused on the spot. However, there's no taking back a gift. This was something Gretus had gone to great lengths to prepare. The next moment, Rania's eyes widened in disbelief because a familiar figure was reflected in them. It was her martial arts master, the sword Saint Kentel. But seeing him again now, he had become an undead. Gretus was very pleased with her masterpiece, because he is the only human who could stand against Ganalt in swordsmanship. So, my dearest Gray, how are you feeling now? After all, you finally get to see your master again. Don't you feel happy and joyful? Looking at the completely silent Rania, Gretus thought she was too happy to speak. Although Rania always knew the other was insane. Right now, she could only say, Gretus, you've successfully enraged me. However, Gretus was completely unconcerned. She stepped forward and gently caressed Rania's cheek. S.O. What are you going to do to me? As she spoke, Gretus ran her cracked fingers through Rania's beautiful hair. Rania, however, was constantly suppressing her anger, trying to persuade herself to remain rational and not be impulsive. Seeing this, Gretus became even more excited. You absolutely have to kill me, okay? So the fearsome, which also had times when she was revered like a god. The reason Gretus liked Rania, that was because her existence reminded her of a beautiful memory. Back then, she was a saintess revered by thousands, Grelia, and by her side, there was a touch of gray, although she was always being lectured by that person for various oversights. That period was also the happiest time of her life, because although that person was strict with their words, they were actually a very lovely person. In his company, Grelia answered the prayers of countless commoners. Her existence shone as brightly as the stars in the sky. But all that beauty was in the past. The laughter and joy had long since vanished. The saintess Grelia was long dead. Now, she was Gretus, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon clan. Rania had the same color as that person, so Gretus would get excited every time she saw her. For this reason, she even prepared a special gift for her. But it seemed Rania didn't like it very much. After all, what normal person could accept their master not being able to rest in peace after death? Unfortunately, Gretus was not a normal person. From the moment she gave up her position as saintess, she had already gone mad. Rania's anger was so fascinating in her eyes. She desperately hoped the other could sublimate to their peak and shine even more brilliantly. So, under her command, the undead sword saint first used an alpha strike to get to Rania's side. Then came a magnificent combo. This was perfect swordsmanship comparable to that of the Sword of Death, Ganalt, a level that even the Sword Saint had never reached in life, because Gretus had further enhanced his body. But this ultimate strike was blocked directly by Rania's arm. Good heavens, are you sure that's not a Chelan arm? The next moment, Rania seized the opportunity, grabbed her former master, and slammed him to the ground. To be safe, she even broke the wrist of his sword-wielding hand. This excellent performance made Gretus even more delighted that it seems the master and disciple are getting along well. However, this level of damage was completely ineffective. As an undead, what's a mere broken arm? It can be reattached in minutes. After all, this was a creation Gretus had poured her heart and soul into, far beyond ordinary cannon fodder. Gretus explained with a smile that she had bestowed a perfect body upon a fragile human, making him flawless. Tired of the constant rambling in her ear, Rania told her to shut up. Gretus replied, "Then make me shut up with your strength." At the same time, Gretus sensed the aura of the hound in the distance that he seems to have brought a new toy. I hope it can amuse me. Meanwhile, Garrett was leading his men to deal with the monsters in the city. Miss Chloe had been successfully rescued and was being safely escorted back. He had arranged the next tasks and was about to go to Belle's location. Just then, Belle's teacher, the master of the Black Magic Tower, appeared. He was worried about his disciple and wanted to go along. The current situation is unusual. The intensity of this mana is beyond imagination. To save time, the Tower Master took out a ring of acceleration and handed it to Garrett. Garrett took it and asked if there were any other magic items. This was a major matter concerning his precious disciple, so the Tower Master had brought everything that might be useful. Hearing this, Garrett asked if he could have the items. The Tower Master replied yes without thinking. But then he suddenly realized, what are you saying? Even ignoring their actual price, their historical value alone is incomparable. However, Garrett had a serious expression. Please, I have to go now. At this moment, the Tower Master looked at the figure in the distant sky and broke out in a cold sweat. You want to take back what he just said? That was a calamity. How could these few magic items possibly be her match? But even so, Garrett said he had to do what he must. The Master of the Black Magic Tower was moved by his fearless spirit and finally agreed to give him the items. Garrett took the items, thanked him, and leaped away. Watching his departing figure, the Master of the Black Tower felt a pang of heartache. After all, those items were the culmination of the Black Magic Tower's efforts, the legacy of several generations. Logically, this should absolutely not be given to an outsider. If the elders found out, he would definitely get a harsh scolding. But when you see a young man risking his life to challenge an unbeatable existence, who can remain indifferent? No matter what, please, you must live to see tomorrow's sun. She was clearly a mage, yet she insisted on fighting a sword saint head-on with her bare hands. However, although Rania's close combat ability was enough to kill the Lich King, she still felt somewhat powerless against the undead Sword Saint, so she decided to use his heavy body against him. She first approached unexpectedly and directly grabbed the Sword Saint's wrist. Then she threw him with a powerful shoulder toss. This excellent performance greatly pleased Gretus. She looked at Rania's back, wondering why she was so cute. Although she wanted to watch a little longer, this body had reached its limit. So Gretus decided to put an end to today's events. With a wave of her finger, the Sword Saint's body was enhanced once again. This was the final surprise she had prepared for Rania, to bloom with the last brilliance of life under her own master's sword. Meanwhile, Rania's subordinate, Garrett, was rushing over. The mana in the vicinity was so dense, it was visible to the naked eye. Without these magic items, he would have long since collapsed. Fortunately, he arrived just in time. On the other side, as the enhanced Sword Saint attacked Rania again, that his speed suddenly increased dramatically. By the time Rania reacted, there was no time to cast a spell to block. In the nick of time, Garrett appeared and blocked the fatal blow. Both Rania and Gretus stared in surprise at the sudden arrival. Garrett made a cool landing, and muffled words came from his mouth. Finally made it. Sorry I'm late. Rania was curious how he got here and what was with the magic item stuck in his mouth. But Gretus felt boundless rage. Why did you come to interfere with me? As Gretus grew angry, the Sword Saint charged forward again. Garrett told Rania to leave first, and he would hold him off. Hearing this, Rania didn't dawdle. She just told him to explain properly later. Then, Garrett and the Sword Saint began to fight. The two exchanged countless blows in a short time, and the Sword Saint was no joke. Garrett felt he had no chance of winning, worthy of the strongest Sword Saint who fought the Sword of Death as a human. For that very reason, he had to let the Sword Saint be laid to rest as a human. The next moment, Garrett stood with his sword held ready. He paid the highest respect to the noble swordsman. This scene awakened the honor engraved in the Sword Saint's very bones. His sword hand began to tremble slightly, and it was as if tears of blood flowed from his empty eye sockets. Then, he too slowly raised his sword, paying the highest respect of a swordsman to Garrett. Because of Garrett's sudden intervention, Gretus's carefully prepared gift was wasted. This made her very unhappy. She needed a vent. Just then, Rania's voice came. You only have these worries because you've lived too long. If you were dead, you wouldn't have this problem. As she spoke, Rania attacked Gretus. Gretus was completely unconcerned. What a pity. Someone without the power of the stars can't kill me. Hearing this, Rania showed no unusual reaction. How would you know if you don't try? As soon as her voice fell, countless magic circles appeared in midair. Don't be fooled by how I usually act like a brute. I'm actually a mage type. Rania shouted in the air. After you take this hit, let's see if you can still spout nonsense. She was one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon clan, yet she was obsessed with a former human hero. For this, she didn't care even if she was crushed to pieces. Just now, Rania finally got serious and acted like a mage for once. She threw a punch with all her might at Gretus. Gretus praised the strike as beautiful, but this level is still far from enough. Rania knew this, of course, without her having to say it. But how would you know if you don't try? In the end, the punch exploded in midair. However, before seeing what happened to Gretus, Rania, upon landing, first spat out a mouthful of blood. That day, she was screwed over by a bunch of terrible teammates and left alone to fight the Demon King. To survive, that she had to sacrifice half of her lifespan. Because of this, her body suffered irreversible injuries. Although her body and soul later mutated, the damage to her soul didn't heal at all. Though she was unwilling to admit it, Rania knew very well that this was her current limit. However, even though Rania had given it her all, Gretus was completely unharmed. But she was a little sad because her mount, the little black dragon, was unfortunately blown to pieces. But Rania told her not to worry. She could send her down to accompany it. As she spoke, Rania had already finished charging her power again. This tenacious willpower seemed incredible to Gretus. She was so similar to that person. Human lives are always as fleeting as a moment. But even so, they still choose to sublimate to their peak. In Gretus's eyes, they were a group of pitiful and foolish creatures. And yet, despite this, it was always humans who were chosen by the stars each time. And for this very reason, Gretus couldn't help but stare at and observe humans. Rania didn't care about this, thought if you want to watch, then watch closely. As she spoke, Rania materialized a holy sword and then shot toward her opponent like a streak of light. For this, her body went beyond its limits, and she couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. She could only grit her teeth and persevere. And this strike, as hoped, cut off one of Gretus's arms. Regrettably, she was just one step away, but in the end, she couldn't kill her. Rania caught the severed arm. Even with one arm severed, Gretus remained elegant, not caring in the slightest. She reached out with her remaining hand to caress Rania's cheek. My cutest, my favorite gray. Next time, you come find me. As she spoke, Gretus's body slowly dissipated, leaving only the severed arm still in Rania's hand. Suits me just fine. I will definitely kill you. While Rania was facing Gretus, Garrett was struggling to hold on against the Sword Saint. But the demonic energy here was too dense, and the Sword Saint's power was too great. The precious magic items shattered one by one. More importantly, what he could feel with every clash. That was this insurmountable barrier. It was a realm achieved by surpassing human limits through one's own efforts. Those who haven't broken through the barrier don't even have the right to fight them. Of course, now was not the time for discouraging words. He had to hold back the Sword Saint for as long as possible. He couldn't let Rania be disturbed in any way. But the power gap between the two was ultimately a bit too large. The sword in Garrett's hand was knocked away. The situation took a sharp turn for the worse. Seeing the Sword Saint about to swing his sword down, Garrett closed his eyes, ready to accept his fate of death. But after waiting for a long time, he didn't feel the slightest pain. So he cautiously opened his eyes to look. He saw the Sword Saint in front of him turn into a black mist and disappear. Finally relieved, Garrett instantly fell to the ground. I survived. At the same time, he realized that Rania must have defeated Gretus. In pain all over his body, Garrett leaned against a large tree to rest. Suddenly, he was startled by a familiar voice. "You look pretty rough." He saw Rania walking over, holding a severed arm. "You look pretty rough yourself." Rania had Garrett move over and sat down next to him. Then she looked at Garrett and expressed her sincere thanks. Without him this time, Rania would have already lost. Being thanked by Rania for the first time, Garrett felt extremely happy. But Rania instantly got angry. "What kind of person do you take me for?" Rania knew the Sword Saint was a very tough opponent. She wanted to know what happened to the magic items. Those things were probably borrowed, right? To this, Garrett could only say, "I wonder if he'll be able to accept it after I explain the whole story." Of course, a normal person wouldn't be able to accept it. But regardless, it was a huge help. I must thank him properly. Rania was curious why he acted so recklessly, knowing it was like a moth to a flame. Garrett smiled and said, "Because someone has to do it." Hearing this, Rania sighed helplessly that you've worked hard. Garrett smiled and said it was nothing. Meanwhile, the master of the Black Magic Tower was walking through the sewers looking for his precious disciple. He was suddenly startled by a pile of shaking rocks beside him. Taking a closer look, well, there he was, The Tower Master went forward and asked Belle if he was okay. Belle pouted helplessly. Oh, I look okay to you? The Tower Master helped Belle up and told him that Chloe was safe. Hearing this, Belle let out a long sigh of relief. That's great. However, at this moment, the Tower Master stared at Belle in shock because the dense protection circuits on his body overturned his understanding, and he couldn't think of anyone else who could do this besides Rania. The scene changes back to the town, where Belle was reunited with Chloe, who had been rescued earlier. Chloe lovingly caressed Belle's cheek. How did you get hurt so badly? She had thought Belle was rescued shortly after she was, but his injuries proved that he had been fighting for his life for her. Chloe felt a little guilty about this. Belle smiled and comforted Chloe, saying it was nothing and that he would never stand by and do nothing no matter what. At this moment, he noticed a very important problem. Chloe and the apostate Gretus were extremely similar. They both had silver hair and green eyes. Gretus looked just like a grown-up version of Chloe. Perhaps Chloe's kidnapping this time was related to this. This meant that there was a possibility of this happening again in the future. Thinking of this, Belle couldn't help but clench his fists. Seeing this, Chloe thought Belle was in pain and anxiously asked if she should call Priest. Hearing this, Belle quickly explained that he was fine. He was just thinking about how, as the leader of the Teamwork Project group, he hadn't participated in a single group discussion. Hearing this, Chloe was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing happily. Only at times like this did Chloe feel that Belle was like a student. At this moment, Chloe was very curious about what kind of person Assistant Professor Rania, who had saved them, was. She seems like a super great teacher. But Belle thought about all the times he'd been beaten up and felt like he didn't want to say anything. His expression left Chloe a bit confused. To this, Belle could only say helplessly, "You'll know when you meet her." Finally, the two young figures walked side by side into the distance. The scene was so harmonious. It's great to be young. Exposed. Rania's identity was finally figured out. Having successfully dealt with Gretus, Rania hitched a ride back. She was lying on the seat without any care for her image, making sounds like a hungry ghost. If her students saw her in this state, her long-established persona would probably collapse. Right now, Rania didn't want to go back at all, because she knew without guessing that her teacher would be furious. As for the reasons to be angry, there were far too many. After the battle, the western area of Katanak was completely destroyed. Even the clock tower, which took years to build, was completely destroyed. The local lord was probably about to cry on the spot. What a huge loss. Thinking about the consequences of her teacher finding out about all this, Rania felt that life was meaningless. Garrett advised Rania not to take it to heart. After all, they were facing a calamity. This was already the best possible outcome, and it was a tough opponent like Gretus. Hearing this, Rania felt it made sense. Suddenly, Garrett remembered something important. Then he handed a letter to Rania, saying it was a sign of sincerity from the royal family. After all, if he just reported that he had fended off the calamity by himself, it would seem too fake. So Garrett mentioned that he had help from the Grey Mage. Because there had been no news of Rania for a long time, the royal family was very worried that he had gone to another country. So this time, they were very generous. They wanted to keep the Grey Mage by their side no matter what. Hearing this, Rania said, "I heard several new magic towers were recently built. Why not just give me one?" Garrett couldn't make that decision and just assumed she was joking. In a flash, the carriage arrived near teacher Rania's home. Rania bid farewell to Garrett and left. Rania walked home alone. For some reason, this battle had a strange feeling to it. But before she could think too much about it, her eyes widened in shock. Because in the middle of the night, her master was actually waiting outside for her return. Rania quickly ran up to him, concerned about why her master wasn't asleep yet. Roselle, however, let out a long sigh. How could he possibly sleep? Roselle looked at his disciple and asked an unexpected question. "Is your body all right?" Hearing this, Rania fell silent. She didn't expect her master to have found out after all, and this was the price she paid for exchanging her lifespan for power. Even so, Rania couldn't let her master worry. She flexed her muscles and said with a smile that she was perfectly fine. The two stood facing each other. Roselle spoke. "Was it necessary to go this far?" Rania forced a smile and replied, "Because someone has to do these things." Roselle ruffled his disciple's head. "I knew you would say that." Rania felt an unprecedented warmth from that large hand. "So this is what it feels like to have a home." The next moment, Rania smiled brightly. I'm home, master. The next day, Rania, who was sleeping in, was woken up by a knock on the door. It was the master of the Black Magic Tower, leading his disciple Belle, who had come to visit. They were here this time to express their gratitude, and the recipient was the Gray Magic Mage. Although her identity was exposed, Rania wasn't the least bit flustered. Now, for people knew about it. The physical changes were indeed unbelievable, but they were more tangible than the changes in the soul. Of course, regardless of Rania's identity, she was someone a master of the Black Magic Tower had to be grateful to. If it weren't for her, his two disciples would probably be gone. But Rania felt she had only done what she was supposed to do. She told him not to worry about it, as long as he didn't reveal her identity. The master of the Black Magic Tower naturally agreed with pleasure. In addition, he had someone he wanted to introduce to Rania, so he invited her to visit the Black Magic Tower when she had time. After discussing the matter, the master of the Black Magic Tower prepared to leave. But when he walked out the door, he found that Belle hadn't moved at all. Rania looked at the motionless Belle, curious if he had something to say to her. Belle stammered for a long time before finally speaking his mind. He wanted to know how he could exchange his lifespan with the scales. Lifespan is also a part of the physical body. He had tried to make a trade before, but it always failed. If he could have traded his lifespan, he wouldn't have been so powerless back then. Rania looked at him with a puzzled expression. Do you need to trade your lifespan to defeat that kind of guy? She unceremoniously flicked Belle on the forehead. Give it up. One careless move, and your soul will be torn to shreds. Besides, if you just want to get stronger, that's not a problem at all. Rania looked at him with a sinister smile. You should know what kind of person I am, right? The scene changes to the school. It was time to turn in their assignments. The first young man to go up was full of confidence, and the circuit he displayed was simply a work of art. But Rania saw the problem at a glance. This wasn't their work at all. With a little questioning, he was completely exposed. After all, the teachers of the Ivory Tower, for the sake of beauty, added a lot of useless things. Rania looked at him with a terrifying expression and announced that the first group had failed. Seeing the first group's result, the leader of the second group was already panicking. After all, compared to their circuit, his own seemed even worse. However, although they had shortcomings, Rania gave them her approval, because their line of thinking was very good. Then Rania pointed out the problems for them. Finally, she praised them for doing a good job. Good work. When it was Lack's group's turn, they had researched weapon enhancement. Then, with a single strike, Lack easily shattered the hard anti-magic stone. It is indeed a very good application, Rania commented seriously. And so, one by one, all the groups finished presenting their results. The goal of this project was to get all the students involved in spell creation. Of course, there was also the requirement of destroying the anti-magic stone. Although some groups failed to destroy it, the ideas they presented were good. And some groups had no problem with the result, but it turned out one person was responsible for everything. In any case, everyone should have learned something. As a reward, there would be no projects for the next week. Hearing this, the students were all stunned. They wondered if they were hallucinating. How could there be such a good thing? After finishing the grading, Rania left the classroom with her books. She still had important matters to attend to. This was the second time she had severed Gretus's arm. Last time, it was snatched back by Ganyrth. But why did no one come and take it this time? Also, this arm has become a bit strange. To figure this out, Rania could only think of one old fellow. Looks like it's going to be another busy week, Rania thought happily. At the same time, an old fellow in a certain small shop felt a chill. He had a bad feeling about something. We're back. After more than a year, I've decided to quit the heroes party and update again. Picking up from last time, Rania arrived at the shabby shop of the silver-haired elf, Garudi. Garudi placed a cup of an unknown beverage in front of Rania. Here, drink it while it's hot. You're not well, so drink up. Rania stared at the liquid, emitting an unidentifiable odor with an indescribable expression. Seeing this, Garudi asked, puzzled, What's wrong? Rania, breaking out in a cold sweat, pointed at a lump in the cup. Is this thing even drinkable? Hearing this, Garudi stroked her chin. That's strange. She really liked it. Although Rania didn't know who she was, her sense of taste must be questionable. Maybe her tongue had been ruined long ago. Rania refused with a look of disgust. I don't want this. Give me wine. A vein popped on Garudi's forehead. I don't have any wine for you here. Rejected, Rania sighed. She reached into her cloak. Actually, it's not that I must have your wine. It's just that I feel like this is going to be a long story. As she spoke, Rania pulled something covered in runes from her bosom. The moment this thing appeared, Garudi's pupils widened abruptly. Well, that's certainly shocking. This is the apostate's arm, Rania said, pointing at it. It feels a bit strange. It was severed, yet there's no sign of decay. Applying further impact has no effect. Starlight doesn't work either. Looking closely, it's almost like a starry sky. If you touch it, it feels like putting your hand into water. I've tried everything, but I can't figure anything out. In the end, I could only come to you. After hearing Rania's words, Garudi silently closed her eyes. A moment later, she opened them again. Her golden pupils trembled slightly. You fought her face to face. Rania looked helpless. She attacked me. I had no choice. I think she intended to use that child to delve deeper. Garudi let out a short sigh, looking at the tabletop with surprise in her eyes. That's really remarkable. Without a holy sword, and without the blessing of the stars, you still managed to tear off Droxim's arm. Hearing this, Rania was startled. You're saying this is Droxim's arm? At this point, names and such no longer matter. Garudi muttered to herself as she rolled up her sleeves. Now, please be quiet for a moment. I need to concentrate. Rania replied with a bored expression. I know. Garudi stroked the apostate's arm, stopping at a certain spot. Then she applied force. With a squelching sound, her fingers seemed to sink into murky water. Seeing this, Rania's eyes widened in shock. She hadn't been able to damage it in the slightest, no matter what method she used before. Garudi frowned. She looked like she was searching for something. After a while, she pulled out a key from inside. It was ancient yet shone with starlight. As I thought, you still kept it. Garudi looked at the key and smiled bitterly. Ronald, when she called out this name, there was no longer any wavering in her tone. Take this key and her arm and go to the north. They will guide you. In the Kalakit Mountains to the north, there is a small research institute. It's perpetually shrouded in mist and ravaged by blizzards, making it difficult for ordinary people to find. Once you get there, you will be able to find a way to kill the apostate Gretus. The scene changes to a personal office in the Royal Knight's headquarters. Garrett sat behind a mountain of documents and let out a long sigh. Finally, halfway done. But the next moment, there was a knock on the door. Senior, sorry to disturb you. Then one of his subordinates walked in, carrying another thick stack of documents. Garrett instantly felt like life was meaningless. Just put it there. His eyes, rimmed with dark circles, glanced at the top document of the newly delivered stack. A single look was enough to make him jump to his feet. Wait, what is this? He asked his subordinate, breaking out in a cold sweat. Shouldn't the sword demon Draka be in the west right now? The subordinate reported he was indeed in the west before, but after defeating the apostate's demonic beast, he immediately set off for the north. The remaining demonic beasts are being dealt with by Lord Hero Carl. Garrett stared at the document with a grave expression. If it's the north, he shouldn't run into the senior from the academy, right? Logically, that should be the case. But for some reason, Garrett had an ominous feeling in his heart. If those two were to meet, things would get even more troublesome. The scene changes to a building in the forest. A shout suddenly rang out. Ronald, get up. Rania, with her eyes closed, sat up, yawning and rubbing her messy hair. Good morning, master. Roselle looked at his troublesome disciple. It's almost noon, and you're casually saying good morning. There's a letter for you. Rania chuckled. Well, it's the weekend. Rania looked at the wax seal on the envelope with some confusion. Whose crest is this? Roselle told her it's the crest of the Grace family. Rania opened the letter and saw that its contents were simple. It was an invitation. Lack had recommended her for a visit to the north. After reading it, the corners of Rania's mouth curled up. Isn't this perfect? I just so happen to have business in the north. Rania danced with excitement. Roselle watched with a weary expression. I didn't know anyone in the north before. Now I have help. I'll just treat it as a trip and go take a look. Time rewinds to a short while ago. Lack received a letter from home. A letter from his family wasn't unusual, but the problem was the sender. A sword was added to the family crest. Only one person would use such an envelope. That was his father. The North is a frigid land battered by blizzards all year round, and the head of the Grace family, who protects this land, rarely writes letters, as he adheres to the principle that a personal visit is better than a letter. Something must have happened. Lack nervously opened the letter. Inside were only a few short sentences. We have a special guest at home. Bring your most capable teacher with you. Write down the name, and I will send a separate invitation. Lack, completely dumbfounded, looked back and forth at the envelope, unable to comprehend the meaning of the letter for a moment. The young woman had only organized a simple extracurricular activity, and it made the participating students feel utterly hopeless. You're telling us to survive under this thing for 10 seconds. Time rewinds to a short while ago. In the principal's office at Ophelia Academy, the principal finished reading the proposal before him, exhausted. He sighed, "That's a lot of extracurricular activities." Rania slowly tilted her head and replied, "Indeed. Trying to do all this before the holidays, there's just not enough time." The principal broke out in a cold sweat. Is this really a matter of time? How could she say such a terrifying thing with such an innocent face? The principal tried to plead for the poor students. The holidays are coming up soon. Before that, they also have to prepare for final exams. I'm afraid too many extracurricular activities will be a psychological burden on the students. The principal was well aware of the various rumors within the academy, so he knew better than anyone just what kind of ordeal had the students, who were deceived by her harmless appearance, gone through. The complaint letters were practically written in blood and tears. Recalling the tear stains left on those letters, a sense of determination ignited in the principal's heart. As the principal, I must protect the students' sleep and youth, as well as their last bit of leisure and entertainment. Isn't this a bit inappropriate? The principal tactfully refused. After speaking, he watched her reaction. I just wanted to do something for the students before the holidays. Was it a bit too much? It was a little. The principal almost blurted out, but ultimately kept his mouth shut, because the young woman's expression caught his eye. Seeing the young woman's dejected expression, the principal felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. He frantically looked through the proposal again. Oh no, wait a minute. Disassembly, analysis, and reconstruction of circuits under extreme conditions. Attempting to adapt to a high-mana environment near Hom Forest. Understanding and practice of defensive spell strength and internal mana circulation. What kind of activity is this? It's less of an activity and more like training. And it's the kind of training only frontline knights would do. However, the principal still made a concession. If it's just one of them, I suppose it's not out of the question. The young woman smiled at his answer. Thank you very much, Principal. I'll be sure to do a good job. Looking at the smiling young woman, the principal couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. Good luck. Only after the young woman left the office did the principal let out a breath he had been holding for a long time. Was that really the right choice? Time skips to the day of the activity. Many students gathered at the entrance of the forest not far from the academy. The number of people who signed up was unexpectedly high. After all, extracurricular activities that offered credits were rare. At first, the students were all full of confidence, because the goal written on the notice board was to withstand a training golem for 10 seconds, until the sound of heavy footsteps was heard, accompanied by the trembling of the earth. Everyone looked towards the sound. The owner of the footsteps slowly appeared. It was a giant golem. The students gasped. More people came than I expected. I'm very happy. The figure originally sitting on the golem's shoulder leaped lightly and landed on the ground. Everyone recognized her. Her symbolic long gray hair was fluttering in the wind. Instantly, the smiles on the students' faces vanished. If the activity was planned by this assistant professor, it was likely to be a nightmare. Rania paid no mind to the students' reactions and began to explain the activity. As stated on the notice, this is a very simple extracurricular activity. You just need to hold on for a while with a defensive spell. After speaking, she gently patted the golem. As if responding to her action, the golem made a hissing sound, let out a large amount of steam, and its dark eye sockets began to glow. She wants us to withstand that thing's attack. Is she crazy? The students were all scared out of their wits. Rania told the students to relax, because safety measures were already in place. Then, let's have a demonstration first. As Rania finished speaking, a female student came forward. She had received a poor evaluation on the last group project. This time, she heard that helping with the demonstration would earn her extra credit, so she came. But this was no longer a matter of extra credit, was it? But it was too late for regrets. The girl could only activate her magic barrier with tears in her eyes. As the golem swung its arm, the sound of it cutting through the air was heard. The girl screamed for help in terror. However, what answered her was a loud bang. The golem's arm shattered the girl's protection and struck her body. The spectating students were all stunned speechless. However, the expected event of the girl being seriously injured did not happen. There were no visible external injuries on her body. She was just kneeling on the ground, dry heaving continuously. Seeing this, Two students went forward to comfort her, worried. Are you alive? Just like that. I have prepared a safety device. Rania spoke as if to answer the students' doubts. I spent a lot of money to equip it with an impact conversion magitech device. All physical impact it causes will be converted into magical impact. As she spoke, Rania suddenly became excited. In other words, even if you're hit, you won't die. At most, you'll feel a bit nauseous from absorbing too much mana like that. No need to worry too much. Rania smiled. In that smile, not a trace of malice could be felt. It was as if she had truly planned a fun activity. But the students felt a chill run down their spines. I'd like to withdraw. Just as someone was about to make a wise choice, a demonic voice suddenly interrupted them. Oh, right. If you withdraw now, you won't be able to participate in any future activities that offer credits. I heard that grades from extracurricular activities are also one of the graduation requirements. So, students, do your best. What else could the students say? This was an activity they had voluntarily signed up for. They could only brace themselves and endure it. With the mentality of sooner or later, I'm going to get hit anyway, a student bravely rushed forward. Then, amidst a series of screams, he was sent flying. Rania recorded with a smile. What a pity. Please take a rest and continue the challenge later. And then there were waves of pain cries, screams, and groans. In stark contrast was Rania. Her face was filled with unprecedented joy. In the blink of an eye, it was dusk. The students collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Although they could barely stand, but if I stand up, it'll be my turn. We were tricked. We were tricked. The upperclassmen said that extracurricular activities with credits were rare, and we should participate whenever there's a chance. That's why they signed up. But it was completely different from what they had imagined. I held on. Someone suddenly burst out with a cheer of success. Although he had only held on for a mere 10 seconds, his face wore a smile, as if he owned the whole world. The students watched, dumbfounded, their eyes filled with admiration. So it wasn't an impossible task after all. And because of this, the scene became even more brutal. As long as they had the willpower, they would keep challenging. Success seemed to be within reach. As the number of challenges increased, the students' circuits became more refined. They were learning. They were growing. Rania felt gratified by this. Although it might feel very tough now for the students, this would become a fond memory, because she had also experienced it. Rania recalled her memories of fighting on the battlefield and nodded gently. Then, amidst the rising and falling wails, she continued her evaluation. It's great that this semester can end so peacefully. This way, I can go to the north without any worries. He's at it again. He's at it again. The Lich King, who has been laying low for hundreds of years, thinks he's got a chance again. Time rewinds to a short while ago. The students finally welcomed their vacation. The Grace family's butler, Sebastian, was directing the maids to pack Lack's luggage. The students who saw this were stunned. Is Lack going back home? I almost forgot. Turns out Lack is a noble. The students, who had spent a semester with Lack, felt a sense of distance for some reason. To eliminate this feeling, they went directly to Lack and started ruffling his hair. Although Lack didn't know what they were doing, he still bent down slightly to cooperate. The two classmates said they felt his hair looked better messy. But when they were done, they looked and thought, damn, how does he look even more handsome? Lack asked the two what was wrong, if they couldn't bear to see him go. The two fell silent for a moment, but the feeling of unfamiliarity was gone. Wahaha, Lack is still Lack after all. Stop stating the obvious all the time. The butler at the side glanced at the frolicking group, then opened his pocket watch to check the time. He then came before Lack and bowed. Young Master Lack, everything is ready. Lack nodded. Thank you for your hard work. See you next semester, then. Lack waved goodbye to his classmates. Yeah, have a safe trip, Lack. The classmates also waved back enthusiastically. Maybe it's too hot. Lack suddenly felt a strong urge to go home. Let's go back to my cool hometown. The scene changes to Rania's side. At this moment, she was excitedly packing her luggage. Roselle looked at the thin clothes and reminded her, the north is very cold, you know? Rania laughed carefreely. If it's very cold, I'll just wear all these clothes. That should be fine. Roselle sighed helplessly. I knew it. As he spoke, he took a thick set of padded clothes out of a dimensional space. Then he handed the clothes to Rania. This is for you. Put on right now. The north is much colder than you imagine. Rania tilted her head and laughed it off. Back when I was running around on the battlefield, I used to roll around on snowy mountains bare-chested. And you're telling me this now. The battlefield is an extreme situation. Besides, you're invited to be a guest of the Grand Duke of the North now, aren't you? You can't be impolite. Be careful on the road. You must come back safely. Feeling her master's care, the corners of Rania's mouth curled up slightly. Then she laughed heartily. Don't worry, I am your student after all. Rania walked out of the mansion with a light step. Before long, she saw a carriage parked ahead. The crest of the Grace family was carved on it. An elderly-looking man bowed to her. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Rania. I am Sebastian, the butler of the Grace family. Rania, who rarely interacted with nobles, replied nervously, Ah, hello. Sebastian politely guided Rania to put away her luggage and board the carriage. And just as she stepped onto the carriage, Ah, you're here, the person inside greeted her. It was a well-mannered young nobleman. Rania blinked her eyes in confusion. Pardon my asking, but who might you be? The young man smilingly took out his exclusive weapon. It's me, Lack. The butler who saw this looked nervous. Young master, how could you take out your weapon in front of a lady? It's too impolite. However, Rania didn't care about this at all. She looked at the axe and said, the circuit is badly damaged. Let me see. I'll fix it for you. Looking at the harmonious scene inside, the butler closed the carriage door for them, breaking out in a cold sweat. It seems I was being a bit of a busybody. The old butler, Sebastian. This white-haired old man had served as the butler of the Grace family for many years. People usually called the Grace family the Lords of the North, and they were indeed very different from ordinary nobles. They did not pursue luxury and vanity, nor did they pay much attention to their appearance, while other nobles were sipping tea, chatting, and holding balls. But the people of the Grace family were on the snowy mountains, hunting orcs one after another. In short, their way of thinking was different from others, and Sebastian had always been a man of traditional thinking. Therefore, it took him a long time to adapt to the life of the Grace family. Recalling that time, it was truly full of challenges. Sebastian did his utmost to complete his work, assisting young Master Lack, teaching the young master etiquette, teaching him to respect women. But thinking about the young master's earlier behavior, how did he become like this? The well-behaved and obedient young master from the north had turned into a wild horse that had broken its reins after arriving in the royal capital. It seems some re-education is in order. Sebastian's fighting spirit was rekindled. Meanwhile, on the other side, in a gloomy valley, a commotion broke out among the fully armed soldiers. Cold sweat trickled down their cheeks. Faced with the terror before them, they couldn't help but tremble. Someone was so nervous that their teeth chattered, making a clattering sound. Their gazes involuntarily shifted in the same direction, focusing on the only light that had not been devoured. That was the one chosen by the stars, the hero Karl. Karl ignored everyone's gazes and silently tightened his grip on the holy sword in his hand. Are you ready, Sala, Remia? It's coming. As soon as his voice fell, endless darkness rose up. A hair-raising laugh echoed across the entire battlefield. Foolish child of the stars, do you think you can stop me alone? The calamity that had survived for 1,000 years, the ancient Lich Skobar, revealed its true form. Come, tremble beneath the shadows. The hero was defeated, but the Lich King who defeated him did not kill him, only because the Lich King wanted him to understand. Without the Grey One in the hero's party, you don't even have the right to touch him. Just moments ago, the hero's party encountered one of the 4 heavenly kings of the demon race, the Lich King Skobar. It was laughable. At the moment of a life-and-death crisis, what surfaced in Hero Karl's mind was her voice. Skobar, that coward, all he knows is setting traps, building altars, and mass-producing the fallen while he hides in the back. He's a total coward, and he has so many clones you can never kill them all. Kill one, and another one pops up immediately. He's a coward, but he's not an idiot. On the contrary, precisely because he's a coward, he considers all possibilities and formulates countermeasures. The traps and altars are all part of his countermeasures. If there's even the slightest opening, he'll seize the opportunity to attack. And once Skobar appears on the battlefield, it usually means only one thing. He is certain of his victory. Remembering this, Karl clicked his tongue. He could roughly guess why the ancient Lich had appeared here. The loss of troops caused by the apostate's demonic beast had forced the front line to retreat. The Demon Lord's army was gathering in the east. He must be here to stop me in order to completely occupy the eastern front. So this is it, huh? Karl tightened his grip on the holy sword, a trace of regret welling up in his heart. If only Ronald were still here. Just then, Skobar's mocking voice was heard. How arrogant, child of the stars. There is no one here now who can block my spells. As soon as his voice fell, 2 incantations appeared on Skobar's slender palms. Then, the incantations filled the sky. Ha! You have nowhere to run now. Without that gray one, what can you possibly do? Bursts of starlight emanated from Carl's body. You don't need to worry. I am enough. I am the hero chosen by the stars. At this time, Sala began to pray, casting a blessing on Carl. After receiving the blessing, Carl leaped up and came down above Skobar's head. At the same time, the elf Remia drew her bow and shot arrows for cover. The arrows flew towards Skobar like a long golden dragon. Skobar was not shaken in the slightest. How foolish. Let me see how effective your attacks are. Spell Plunder. As these 2 incantations were activated, the light of the stars was dyed black. All the attacks heading towards Skobar changed their target to Carl. Taking a heavy blow, Carl immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Skobar looked at him as if he were an ant. I won't kill you. I want you to know that without the gray one, you don't even have the right to touch me. Meanwhile, on the other side, Rania suddenly felt a chill run through her entire body. A drop of cold sweat trickled down her face. What's going on? Is it an enemy attack? Seeing this, Lack asked with concern, Assistant Professor Rania, did you have a nightmare? Rania pulled open the curtain, looked outside, and replied, No, it's just been a long time since I've been on a journey like this. I'm suddenly a little nervous. It's still a long way to the north. Lack told Rania to continue resting. Rania waved her hand, saying she had rested enough. Then she tilted her head and looked out the window. Why did I have to dream about my time on the front lines? I have a bad feeling. The scenery flew by at a rapid pace. This matter of riding in a carriage, that was very unfamiliar to Rania. After all, back on the front lines, she always ran. In the demonic lands filled with mana, let alone a carriage. That even a mana-driven vehicle couldn't be used. Every step there could be a trap. One could only travel day and night on foot. And now, she was traveling in such a luxurious carriage. She finally felt a little bit retired. As Rania was pondering these things, the carriage stopped. The butler knocked on the door and said, Young master, Miss Rania, we will now begin preparing dinner. Please rest for a while. Then, the 2 got out of the carriage under the butler's guidance. Rania's eyes widened as if she had never seen the world. I thought we'd be hunting some rabbits or something to eat. No need to take turns on night watch. No need to set up a soundproof barrier. And I don't have to eat grass with an idiot. Looking at the elaborate feast prepared on the table, Rania couldn't help but marvel. Can we really be this extravagant? Looking at Rania, staring at the food without moving, the butler couldn't help but ask nervously, Oh, you not like these? Snapping back to reality, Rania gave a dry laugh and picked up her knife and fork. No. It's just my first time having such a luxurious feast during a trip. It's delicious. As Rania cut into the high-quality steak, she thought, I'm a professor now. I should have the right to enjoy such a lavish trip, right? It wasn't that she disliked her time on the battlefield. It was just that the hero, who did nothing but fool around with women, really turned her stomach. What's that guy Carl up to? Now that the nuisance me is gone, he's probably having an even better time. Little did she know, while she was enjoying her grand meal, the hero's party she was thinking of had already been completely wiped out. Oh, pitiful child of the stars. I told you long ago, you are useless on your own. The young girl felt as if her eyes had been sullied. Why were they all shirtless? On the carriage heading north, Rania and Lack talked a lot. Lack was very innocent, and his questions were very direct. He suddenly asked, So, Professor, who do you think is the strongest mage? Hearing this, Rania's face filled with confidence. I asked that even question? Of course, it's yours truly. Lack was completely bewildered. Yours truly another name for a mage? Rania felt guilty and didn't dare to look at him. Oh no, I actually said what I was thinking. She explained awkwardly. Oh no. The strongest is, of course, the 3-star rated Lord Rainier. Could there be anyone stronger than a gray mage? However, Lack didn't agree at all. Aren't there also the ancient lich and the apostate? Rania retorted. One of them was utterly defeated by Rainier, and the other is a summoner. That doesn't count. Lack asked again, Isn't there also the ancient dragon mage? Rania frowned. That thing isn't even human. How should I put it? It doesn't feel like an ordinary living being. You say it like you've seen them in person. Lack's simple sentence silenced Rania. She explained guiltily, No, Lord Rainier told me all of this. Have you heard about Lord Carl, then? At these words, Rania's expression instantly fell. I didn't expect you, who looks so honest, to also harbor unrealistic fantasies about Carl. But she could understand. After all, not only was the church heavily promoting that scoundrel, but even the bards were singing his stories, even mythologizing him as an incarnation of Drasham. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Rania couldn't help but clench her fists, but there was no point in dwelling on it now. Then she asked Lack what kind of existence he thought the so-called hero should be. Lack stroked his chin, thought for a moment, and replied, "A guardian of humanity? Probably something like a shield that protects humanity." Rania nodded. Yes, the hero was supposed to be that kind of existence. But Carl is different. Rather than a shield, he's more like a spear. He can't retreat, nor can he cover the flanks. He can only stare straight ahead. Therefore, he is the spear with the strongest breakthrough power. In fact, a hero with that kind of breakthrough power is very rare. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hunt the Black Dragon. If that kid Carl continued to grow in 5 years or so, sooner or later, he would be able to reach the Demon King beyond the sword. It was because he saw this possibility that his past self couldn't give up on Carl. But because of this talent, that guy actually gave up on trying. Damn it, a wave of inexplicable frustration washed over Rania. If his talent were given to the Holy Knight Galahad, we would have taken down at least 2 of the 4 heavenly kings by now. Lack listened intently. Looking at her, he was suddenly reminded of his master for some reason. Rania continued to complain. To unleash his maximum power requires several conditions, and every time they made me fulfill them. As soon as the words left her mouth, Rania realized something was wrong. She quickly tried to cover it up. That's what my elder brother told me. Lack's expression was very complicated. He felt that the assistant professor had become strangely agitated. Rania told him not to worry about the details, then pulled open the curtain to see where they were. She was suddenly surprised to see that although it was summer, snowflakes were drifting outside. In any case, the strongest mage is Lord Rainier. You'd better remember that. Rania ended the topic like that. Lack quickly agreed. Okay. The scene changes. They arrive at a northern city. Although it wasn't her first time here, Rania still found it refreshing, looking at the people around her with happy smiles on their faces. Only then did Rania truly realize that the north wasn't just cold. In her previous impression, the east was desolate. In the south was hot and desolate. Soon after, Rania followed Lack to the front of a shop. It was a weapon shop. Lack always came here whenever he needed to buy weapons. As soon as he pushed the door open, a wave of heat rushed out, mixed with the smell of metal. Then a group of shirtless, muscular men greeted Lack enthusiastically that, "Yo, you're finally back. We've been waiting for you, young master." Instantly, the light faded from Rania's and the butler's eyes. Why is everyone shirtless? Lack happily bumped fists with a big bearded man. "Long time no see, Kara." Kara gave a simple greeting and then turned to look at Rania. "And who might this be?" Lack introduced her. "This is a professor from Ophelia Academy, a guest personally invited by my father." Hearing this, Kara was startled. "If she's really a guest of our north, how come I didn't know?" He threw an arm around Lack's shoulder and asked in a low voice, "Be honest, did you bring that young lady here yourself?" The innocent Lack had no idea what he meant. "Yeah, is there a problem?" At this moment, Rania was admiring the weapons under the guidance of a blonde blacksmith. The blonde man enthusiastically held up a pair of meteor hammers and introduced them. "This is a top-grade weapon, but no matter how good the material or how skilled the blacksmith, if you don't maintain it well, it will eventually rust." As he spoke, the blacksmith struck another pose. A weapon is the incarnation of a warrior. If you don't train diligently, you will surely face defeat. Rania watched with a fascinated expression. "Just talk. Why are you suddenly posing in front of me?" But his words made a lot of sense. Whether it's a weapon or a person, if not properly trained, they will eventually rust. As the saying goes, jade cannot be polished without carving. Rania secretly made up her mind. When school starts, I must properly polish these students. At the same time, Chloe, who was about to enroll, suddenly felt a chill run through her body. She let out a sudden sneeze. Belle looked at her with concern. "No way. Can you catch a cold in the middle of summer?" Chloe hugged her arms and shivered, saying, "The moment I saw the school, I suddenly had a bad feeling. We're about to enter the school gate. Are you okay? Did you stay up late last night?" Belle asked suspiciously. Chloe explained angrily, "Of course not. Although I did stay up late reading a novel last night. I really had a bad feeling just now." This is a hero's intuition. I know. The dormitory is over there," Belle said, pointing in a direction. Chloe glared at him. "Hey, you don't believe a word I'm saying, do you?" The The scene changes. The master of the Black Magic Tower sighed helplessly that I was already busy, and now I'm even busier. He placed his hand on the crystal ball on the desk. A smug voice came from within. You must be dying to know why I suddenly contacted you, right? The master of the Black Magic Tower pinched the bridge of his nose in annoyance. Weren't you the one who contacted me? You're quite the busybody, leaving me with no time to rest. If you don't get to the point, I'm hanging up. On the other end, the master of the White Magic Tower said with a smirk, Rania is on her way to the north right now. While you're wasting your time on trivial matters, my lack has already invited her over. Oh, my little lack is just wonderful. Of course, that's also thanks to my excellent guidance. In any case, the outcome is already decided. I just need to build a good relationship with her while she's in the north. This is the difference between you and me. The master of the White Magic Tower laughed arrogantly. The master of the Black Magic Tower listened to his gloating with a blank expression that that's so? Then good luck with that. The master of the White Magic Tower's eyes widened in disbelief. You actually hung up? Old man, have you finally gone senile? Go on and waste your time on those things. And in the meantime, I will pull her into our White Magic Tower. The young girl had only participated in a simple test, but she ended up accidentally taking out the examiner. Just a moment ago, Rania's group's carriage had stopped in a snowy field. Lack told Rania that the rest of the way might require them to walk, but luckily, the weather is pretty good. Rania looked with a cold sweat at the pine trees in the distance, covered in a thick layer of snow. Good weather? This is considered good? Just then, a clamor of voices was heard. Young master, welcome back. Rania looked towards the sound with a face full of question marks, wondering what kind of spectacle it was this time. But Lack had a smile on his face. On a city wall not far ahead, several muscular men were shirtless, flashing their white teeth. They greeted Lack enthusiastically. Young master, it's been a long time. Seeing this, Rania's expression instantly froze. Why are they all gathered together shirtless? Watching Lack excitedly go forward to greet them, Rania spoke up, Mr. Butler. Before Rania could finish, the butler already understood what she meant. Then, with a deadpan expression, he began to forcefully save face. This is a common way of welcoming people in the north. To a warrior, a well-honed body is no different from a treasure. They are showing their most precious treasure to their guest. Rania stared with distrust at the butler, who dared not meet her gaze. The scene before her was too avant-garde, and Rania felt a strong sense of resistance. That really the case? Suddenly, Rania felt a very unpleasant sensation. Wait, does that mean? When I came here last time, I wasn't treated as a guest. Just then, a figure came up to Rania and greeted her. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Rania. I am One Gal, the third seed of the Grand Duke's 13 warriors. I will be your guide for this occasion. One Gal said cheerfully, to welcome our esteemed guest, we have prepared a small welcoming ceremony. This is a necessary process to enter White Knight City. Rania stared at the man before her with a frown. This guy is properly dressed, though. So what exactly is the standard? One Gal continued his explanation on his own, that we know that you teach magic at the academy. So we have prepared 2 paths for you to choose from. The first path is a contest of knowledge against the mages of the Magic Tower. The second path is a contest against the snowy mountains, which represent nature. One Gal pointed to the city behind him and told Rania, this is a test. No matter which option you choose, you must reach White Knight City by your own abilities. Lack was not surprised by this. He chose to climb the mountain. After all, I choose this every year. Rania, however, first asked a question. The mages to be challenged include the master of the White Magic Tower, right? One Gal looked at Rania in surprise. Your intuition is sharp. The master of the Magic Tower volunteered to participate. He said he wanted to personally test the guest's strength. He seemed quite concerned when he said it. She'll definitely choose the first path, right? One Gal thought after answering the question. After all, she is a mage. It's hard to expect her to have the heroic spirit of a warrior. However, Rania's answer was completely beyond his expectations. Then I'll choose to climb the mountain as well. I want to experience the baptism of the north. Hearing this, One Gal was stunned for a moment. Then, a wide grin spread across his face. Different from her appearance, she's actually a hot-blooded person. The road to White Knight City has been sealed. Warriors scattered in various places are responsible for supervision. Lack will start from the east and Rania from the west. They will succeed as long as they reach White Knight City before sunset. With all preparations complete, with a loud shout from one gal begin, Lack charged forward without hesitation. One gal sat on a high tree branch, observing Rania's every move, ready to intervene if necessary to prevent the guest from getting injured. As for Lack, he wasn't concerned at all. However, in that instant, Rania suddenly turned her head. Their gazes met from a great distance. One gal was startled. Could it be that she's looking at me? Rania's gray-blue eyes revealed a murderous intent. Why are you ignoring Lack and staring at me? Finally, Rania turned her head again and continued to climb the snowy mountain. A quick glance along the way revealed many simple traps. However, they were no hindrance to her, so she simply chose to ignore them. Although she was reluctant to admit it, thanks to that skeleton, she had learned many things, such as trap detection, vision expansion, mana perception, and so on. To be honest, as a practice partner, Rania felt that the skeleton was quite competent. When she had time, she planned to use that guy's traps to test her students. Of course, Rania hadn't seen all the traps. When she encountered an interesting one, she would stop to observe it carefully and determine the type of trap. Then she would deliberately kick a stone to trigger the trap. Watching the wooden spikes shoot up from the ground, Rania looked amazed. I see. That's pretty good. One gal watched Rania's actions with confusion. What's going on? He had thought she would break through the snowy mountain without a trace. But now she was deliberately triggering traps and then observing them. One gal felt a wave of panic. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation, and for a moment, he didn't know how to react. He wondered if he should readjust the traps. One gal came down from the tree and ran toward the traps set up ahead. The traps he had set before were not very dangerous. This time, he would increase their power a little. One gal was modifying a trap, but he didn't notice a figure had already flashed behind him. By the time he sensed something was wrong and turned his head, Rania slammed her hand on his head, smashing him violently to the ground. What is this monstrous strength? One gal thought resentfully before losing consciousness. Just then, Rania noticed the rope in his hand and the trap beside him. She suddenly realized something was wrong. Could it be that this person was just here to set up traps? She had thought the test included a person-to-person combat segment. At this moment, Rania suddenly felt guilty. If I mess up again this time, I'll definitely be kicked out by my teacher. Thinking of this, she quickly knelt down and started calling out to Can you hear me? Please, pull yourself together. If he couldn't get up, the young girl felt for the first time that being too popular wasn't necessarily a good thing. This mountain of roast meat was really not something she could eat alone, while Rania was showing her might on the snowy mountain. That the Master of the North was waiting for her arrival in the castle. The Grand Duke's wife was a little worried about the guest. As for her own son, there was no need to worry at all. The wife looked at the calm Grand Duke and asked, "Why aren't you worried at all?" "Because there's no need to worry. In fact, I'm looking forward to it," the Grand Duke replied with a straight face. Lack has perfectly inherited my intuition. Since he's the one who recommended the guest, she must be no ordinary person. The Grand Duke's intuition was indeed sharp. At this moment, the groans of the northern warriors were echoing on the snowy mountain. What a shame. We were completely outplayed, someone said. We can only feel regret, another replied, because we misjudged our opponent's strength. We let our guard down just by looking at her appearance. As warriors, we are truly unqualified. That couldn't even be considered a real battle. It was too disrespectful. We should have been on high alert the moment one gal was taken out. A vein popped on O'Neagle's forehead. Don't use me as a bad example. The warriors all started laughing. You were lying on the ground not long ago, but your mouth is still pretty tough. Just then, someone stood up and said, "If we messed up, we just have to make up for it. If we take a shortcut, we should still be able to meet our guest at the final gate. We are the proud warriors of the North. Defeat is an unbearable humiliation. But learning from it is our true style." The warrior's speech won everyone's approval. Exactly. As an apology, let's entertain our guest with all our might. Soon, the northern warriors, carrying axes, caught up with Rania. Rania glanced behind her, puzzled. Why are they chasing me again? They haven't changed a bit compared to that time. Just because I helped them out, they keep chasing me. There are 6 in total. For chasing from behind. Where are the other 2? A blue light appeared in Rania's palm. Spell enhancement. After finishing her preparations, Rania suddenly turned around and punched one of the warriors. The warrior coughed up blood and fell on the spot. Then, another warrior leaped from behind him and brought an axe down towards Rania. Rania blocked the powerful blow with her enhanced arms. The endless harassment was starting to annoy Rania. She cast a binding rune, restraining the men with chains. After doing this, Rania rolled her shoulders. She felt a little tired. If she continued to hold back like this, it would be difficult to break the stalemate. So she decided to unleash a supersized one to completely crush their fighting spirit. As runes appeared one by one in her palm, the next moment, a brilliant light flashed through the crowd, followed by a roar that shook the snowy mountain. The aftershock grazed O'Neagle's cheek, leaving a small cut. One gal turned his head, dumbfounded. He couldn't believe it. A single blow had such power. The shockwave did not hit the warriors. They understood that this was the result of her deliberately avoiding them. Otherwise, they might not have survived. Only then did the warriors realize that this lady was not a warrior. With this one blow, Rania had perfectly demonstrated to them what an overwhelming power gap meant. With that, the trial ended. The warriors expressed their highest respect to their guest. The scene changes to the northern capital, White Knight City. A welcome party is in full swing. One gal, laughing loudly, holds up a glass of wine and tells Rania to eat to her heart's content. On a huge platter, roast meat was piled up like a mountain. Rania's eyes glazed over. As if that wasn't enough, another full plate of meat was brought over. The butler stood respectfully by Rania's side, cutting the most delicious parts for her. Rania suspected they had brought an entire pig to her. This is a northern tradition. The butler whispered in Rania's ear. The warriors only serve good meat to guests who have passed the trial, and the amount of meat expresses their degree of recognition. The butler smiled as he spoke. This is the first time I've seen this much. You should be proud. Proud or not, I can't help but feel this pile is getting bigger. While Rania was struggling, a noblewoman approached her. Hello, Miss Rania. I heard that my son was under your care. I am Philia, the lady of the Grace family. May I have a little chat with you? Rania understood as, oh, this is Lack's mother. She stood up excitedly. As long as it frees me from this meat hell, I'd be delighted. Let's go. Just then, Sally, the master of the White Magic Tower, burst through the door, panting. Wait a minute. You're having a party here, and you didn't even tell me. And to think she had assumed Rania would definitely go to her place, sitting there foolishly waiting all day. But then she unexpectedly learned that the party had already started. What on earth is going on? Lady Philia came forward with concern. Oh my, are you all right? Why are you so out of breath? Sally, sweating profusely, replied, I'm fine, my lady. Thank you for your concern. Oh dear, your ears are all red. Please come over here. Faced with the lady's invitation, Sally said there was no need, as she had important business. Philia gently interrupted Sally. Before Sally could properly refuse, she was pulled away. Seeing this, Rania couldn't help but click her tongue. What on earth is that woman doing here? Just then, Lack reminded her, let's go, father is still waiting. Rania agreed that you're right, let's go. The scene changes. A figure stood by the window, muttering to himself, it's so noisy outside. A serving warrior spoke up, It seems a new guest has arrived in White Knight City. They're holding a banquet. Would you like to go? No, I'll pass. I'm not used to such noisy scenes. The cold voice of the sword demon, Draka, echoed in the room.